Oconomowoc Common Council meeting for Tuesday, June 6, 2023. Has appropriate meeting notification been made?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
If you would all please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder?
Here.
Alderman Pepper?
Here.
Alderman Maroney? Alderman Douglas?
Here.
Alderman Rozak?
Here.
Altman Cloth?
Here.
Alderman Ellis?
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Here.
Before we move on, I would just like to take a moment of silence for former Mayor Alderman Tom Foti, who we lost this past week. I have the honor to use his gavel. He got this gavel because it was really cheap, and he was always been a very frugal mayor for the city of Oconomowoc. If we just take a moment and honor his service to our community. Thank you, and thank you to the entire Foti family. I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of minutes for May 16th, 2023.
So moved, Rozak.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Without objection, I'd like to move item 10A, a mayoral appointment, forward for the Police Commission. Any objection? So I'd like to bring forth Jen Husapple. Jen, if you could come to the podium. We just met a few weeks ago. We spent a great deal of time talking about our Police Commission and the opening there. The information is in all the aldermen's packets, and I'd like to just have you give us a little bit of your background for the council, and then council, you have the opportunity for questions.
First off, can you hear me? Does that work? I'm a little bit of a giant, so sometimes these don't work well, okay? First off, it's such an honor to be here with you guys tonight. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for the inquiry as to whether I'd be interested in this. We've got an incredible city. I love our city. I've been a bit of a corporate orphan throughout my career, where if my company asked me if I'd move, I said yes. So that means I've been a little bit all over the country. And I have to say with pride that I've been here over 10 years now and have absolutely no intent to change. My boss and I have had that conversation multiple times. It's incredible what you've built, what you do every day. It reflects in our community, and it's why we're just so happy to be here. It's a privilege to even be considered for this type of role. I think we all in our lives have chances to make impacts around us, and the opportunity to be able to learn and grow with the community and be there beside you listening, I think is incredible. My background isn't in police. My background is actually in corporate America, having a lot of fun building new sites for 1,200 people in San Antonio, driving financials, working with engineers, figuring out what the problem is, and then figuring out how to get the right people in the room to solve it. And at times, I gotta be honest, figuring out we had the wrong problem and we didn't solve it, so now we have to go back and figure it out again. But it's been an incredibly blessed life that I am extremely grateful for. And though I've had the chance to meet a few of you, I hope I get to meet more of you in person. I'd love to do coffee and just learn from you and listen. I think one of the keys in life is having really big ears. I think with the more we can listen and observe and just ask to understand, it's incredible what we can do together. So though I don't have any background in any of this kind of forum, I'm really excited to learn. I'm really excited to understand. I think I have things I can give. I think there's things I can do to help and to really be people's right hand and help with what you're trying to achieve. But I actually don't know for sure, and that's the honest truth. But I'd really like the opportunity to figure that out together. And I think I could have a positive additional impact to our community because it is so amazing. I don't know that we can get better, but I'd love to be a part of the team and family that figures that out. So with that, what questions do you have for me? Open book.
And to kind of start off here, I met Jen through a recommendation from another city resident. We had breakfast, we talked for a while, and multiple discussions. And then I asked her to kind of look and come over to the police department She sat down with myself, with Chief Pfister, with Mark Fry, and also with the chairman of the Police Commission, Mike Miller. So we wanted to make sure that it was a really good fit because it's such an important appointment. It's also a 5-year commitment. And so it's something that we take very, very seriously. So thank you for all your efforts to learn more, as you've said, to listen more and to try to bring some of the skills that you have to our community. And I'd like to open it up for Alderman comments or questions. Alderman Shellpepper.
Jen, thank you for volunteering, putting your name forward for the role. How did you learn about it?
Actually, Susan's my neighbor, and she had heard that there may be an opening, and she's like, hey, I think that you might be really good at this. Have you thought about looking into it? And then she connected me to the mayor, and we had coffee, and I learned more. And then I've been able to sit down and listen to more people and just learn. Truthfully, I got a lot more to go, but that's how I found out. I wasn't looking, but it seems like an amazing opportunity in a city I love.
What do you have any goals, to do while you're on the commission? Do you have anything in mind that you want to work on or anything? What do you said you weren't sure if you had something to offer. Do you have anything more concrete that you think, though, that you can contribute?
I think I need to listen. I think you guys all
To-
have
to
my
who?
to you, even.
Well, right, but outside of me, I mean, on the commission,
I think I have a lot to learn. Do I have an answer for you right now? No,
Okay.
I don't. But do I think if you'll give me 90 days to 6 months? Probably. And the reason I say that long is because it takes a long time to understand the kitchen. Come in from the outside with perceptions of, hey, I need to do this, or I need to accomplish that, and you haven't sat down and you haven't taken a moment to understand the other person's position, to understand the environment, especially if you know you're coming in not knowing that. Are you really having the impact you could have? Or is it time to listen and then come back and ask that question? I'd love to have coffee in 90 days to 6 months, and let's talk some more.
Well, I appreciate that. Obviously, if you get on, it's not that easy to get you off in, 90 days to 6 months, but
You know what?
here's my question, though, for
Okay,
you.
you want
Here's
me
my
on?
question for you,
Then
though,
I'll
is
go.
can you be fair and impartial? That's usually what I ask of that I usually ask for the police commission candidates. I mean, and I think that's what I've typically asked in a public forum.
I think that's
Can
a
you be
really-
fair and impartial for the matters you're going to be discussing and providing a vote on?
That's a really good question. I can tell you I believe I can be. I think I've proven it throughout my career, but you don't know that. So that's something we're going to have to see together. And here's what I'm going to say. I understand it's a 5-year appointment, but if I'm not having an impact and I'm not doing the right things, then why should I stay on here is what I'm going to ask you in all honesty. So it has to benefit both of us. So maybe I should only be on here 90 days to 6 months if you're not happy with what I'm thinking, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you putting your name forward.
Alderman Ellis.
So, what is your biggest accomplishment to this date? Whether it's business, well, let's just talk about business. What's the biggest thing you've done that you're very proud of?
You're going to crack up, so be ready when you ask me these kind of questions. So I had the privilege of meeting 3 young ladies about 8 years ago. And those 3 young ladies were 11, 14, and 16. And I had the privilege of, even though I didn't become their stepmom, their entire family calls me their aunt, including their stepmom and their new dad. And I always go to Thanksgiving with their stepmom and their new dad. And I've been able to see those 3 girls flourish. One just graduated from Madison and is now in Discover's intern program down in Chicago. Another one just graduated from Madison, and she's now going into med school, and she completed undergrad in 3 years. And the other one is now a freshman at Madison who will be designing a solar waffle maker this summer, which I've questioned her a little bit. I'm like, Abs, help me understand. Waffle maker, kitchen, solar, you gotta help me here. But honestly, Never knew they were going to come in my life. Definitely didn't realize that they would stay in my life. And it all started with them locking me in a pantry and seeing what I would do. That was our first interaction together. And it's incredible to see what they've been doing. And truthfully, that's the thing I'm most proud of, is the influence and how I've been able to help them. They aren't my kids by blood, but those are my kids.
That's outstanding. So as far as business-wise is concerned,
Yes.
what are you proud of that you've done as far as in the business arena?
I have a lot of leaders around me who, at one point in time, I might have hired. And it's incredible to see where their careers are going. It's incredible to see what they're doing. I think it's really fun to be able to look around you after you've been in something for 20, 25 years and see people at Macy's, at Bloomingdale's, at Discover, Amex, all over the place, including at Kohl's, who maybe they weren't able to buy a house. Maybe they were figuring out what it meant to be a spouse in a relationship. Maybe they were figuring out, I went to school, now I've got all this debt and I'm struggling. But you saw throughout these years, so many people come in and they were starting out in life. They were figuring it out. And as you got to work with them, you had a moment in time where maybe you were able to help them or influence them in a way, or continue to support them, whether they're at the same company, same city, same state, doesn't matter. You're still there. And you're seeing them now. They've got homes, they've got cars, they've got livelihoods, and now they're planning on how they're going to pay for college with their kids. And some of them, like Stephen, was down in San Antonio, and he came in as a non-exempt associate with me when we were building the site. And he, at the time, didn't have a family, didn't have a house. I watched him work his way up, and I did everything I could to help him. He's now actually a senior manager out in Colorado. Doesn't work for Kohl's anymore. Has 2 kids. Very stable. And if you could have met the guy when we first opened up San Antonio, was kind of figuring out how maybe to get up when the alarm rang in the morning. But the impact that you see as they do it, it's amazing. That's what you want to see. You want to see those moments where people go from, I'm not sure I can do this, maybe I need somebody to tell me how to do it, to you see them with confidence, where they go try it and they're okay to fail, they're okay failing and figuring that out, but they have confidence and they just keep growing and the impacts they've had. So I've got a lot of stories like that, but that's the best thing. Like, I call them my family because they are my family and they call me their family too. It doesn't matter. When you're at work, you're investing in someone as an individual. You're not investing in them for the company you're at. How do you help them achieve their goals?
Alderman Mulder?
I appreciate how much you've emphasized kind of your skills in leadership. And you've talked a lot about, on your resume, you talk a little about retention and things like that, but the toughest thing with this job might be when you're looking at the other side of retention. What's the toughest employee situation you've come upon, and how did you handle it?
Here's what I'm going to
The
say.
most, and not a performance issue, but maybe the most volatile situation you've come on that really had to be acted upon quickly.
I can give you some details. One thing I'll give you is, I think a really important philosophy is that as someone is leaving an organization,
Can you speak up a little louder? We're having a little hard time. There we go, thanks.
I'm going to tell you, no one has ever told me that before. And as you guys get to know me, you'll understand why. Sorry. My boss would love to hear that, actually. It's really interesting when someone's leaving the organization, especially not by choice. It's extremely important that they are just as whole as they were a few minutes ago before they found out. There are multiple reasons that could happen. But we are here to make sure someone is whole and feels good, whether they don't agree, disagree, or anything in between, but they're leaving feeling as whole as you can. Some of the most difficult, one we'll just laugh at, was not difficult, but it might be interesting to be pulled out of a boardroom because your associate is sitting on the roof because somebody forgot to lock the ladder. And the first moment is, are they okay? Like, that's the first thing. And as soon as you figure out they're okay, okay, can you help me with what they're doing on the roof? Oh, they wanted some more sun. Okay, so what are we gonna do? How are we gonna help them down? Yeah, moments you don't think are gonna have in your career. Harder ones might have to do with drugs. Probably the hardest might have to do with someone who, from their heart, thought they were caring for a customer. And so they took extra steps because they thought the customer was in an abusive situation. And they were in a total different state. But they took extra steps to try and check on this customer because they were so worried about them. But that would be customers' private information. And instead of escalating it up and letting us help them with their concerns, they took it upon themselves to reach out through Facebook and other means to try and check on her because they were very afraid that she was not okay. Those are some of the hardest because you can see where someone's heart is and you can see what they're trying to accomplish. But there's regulation and there's laws. And even with the best of intent, at times our actions have to be held accountable to. And at that point in time, it is also the most important that we make sure we care for them as an individual. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Alderman Rozak?
Hi, Jen. We spoke today. Appreciate you taking
did.
my call.
In the middle of my testing, thank you. It was a great call.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I did as well. The three most important commissions we have to appoint are police, fire, and library. That's because they're principally independent of political machinations of the council or really the people in the community once they're appointed. So this is important. Kudos to the mayor for putting up a fresh face. I appreciate that. I think your corporate background would be interesting on the commission. We spoke a lot on the phone. I think you understood what some of my questions are focused, and I'm not going to ask you more questions tonight, but the importance of safety and police to our community, that's number one. I gleaned from our conversation that you do in fact believe that safety is a priority for our community. I also appreciate the council taking a really serious look at these appointments. We've done better, I think, over the last couple of years of looking at folks, asking serious questions, trying to engage with folks before. That's important. My one concern only with you tonight is you seem, the police commission can deal with some pretty difficult issues. Me personally, seeing you in person here and talking to you, you seem a tad soft-spoken, not in a bad way, but you know, just recently the police commission had to deal with a very, very intense personnel issue. And it's not for the lighthearted. It's not just going to be policies and procedures. Sometimes there are significant personnel hiring, firing decisions that can be very sensitive and truly affect the community, both financially and safety. Do you believe as you stand here today that you're capable of doing those things?
Yes.
Alderman Douglas?
I would just say the one thing to realize is corporate is a little different than dealing with a union and stuff like that. So stuff that you'll learn as it goes on, but it's a little different way of handling things with a procedure. So just keep that in mind.
I would agree, and I'd love to have coffee and learn more on your perspective on that.
Alderman Altman-Cloth?
As the alderman on the police commission and a fellow Jennifer, should you be confirmed tonight, I just want to welcome you.
Thank you.
No questions.
Appreciate it.
Any further questions? Like to entertain a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder?
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper?
Aye.
Alderman Maroney?
Aye.
Alderman Douglas?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak,
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth,
Aye.
Alderman Ellis,
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Welcome, and thank you for giving of your time to the community.
100%,
Thank you.
and thank you to all of you. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on back to item 5, comments and suggestions from citizens. We're going to first start off with a presentation of the 2022 audited financial statements, and then go directly into individual questions. Are you ready, Lori?
So the audit is complete, and our auditors are here tonight to give you the executive summary and overview. So I've got Paul Franz from Baker Tilly, and I'm just going to turn it over to him.
Great. Paul, welcome back. It's nice to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. In your packet, there was 2 reports that we issued. One that was prepared by management, the annual comprehensive financial report, and then one with a blue cover that summarizes kind of the responsibilities of the audit process and ultimately our findings in that. Additionally, there was about a 10-page handout that summarizes the 2 documents. I'll use that to talk tonight, and then I have a couple of those pages up on the screen here. Nothing but good news tonight to share with you. We've issued an unmodified opinion, also known as a clean bill of health, on the audit. What that tells you is that all necessary disclosures have been made within that annual comprehensive financial report. All governmental accounting standards have been adopted and applied consistently year over year. And again, that there were no material issues identified during the course of the audit. So when you hire an external auditor, ultimately the outcome that you're looking to hear. We did not identify any material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or control deficiencies throughout the audit process. Management, we do look at the significant transaction cycles of the city. So how do you pay bills? How do you pay payroll? How do you collect cash? For building really our audit process, looking for areas of risk. That's typically where we might find those deficiencies to report. There was nothing that going through that process that led to recommendations that I needed to bring forward to management and or to highlight any deficiencies. So when I compare you to other communities that we audit, that's not a common outcome. I'm typically finding some sort of material weakness that I'm reporting, whether it's a lack of segregation of duties or an issue within financial reporting with material misstatements. And so management should be commended for the information and structure that they have in place. And you should be comforted to know that you have good financial information at your fingertips throughout the year to make the decisions that you need to. So that's the best news that can come from the audit standpoint, and I'm blessed to be able to tell you that. So to give you a little bit of financial highlights for the year up on the screen, we do have a look at the details of the general fund balance. There are 5 categories that make up that fund balance to help describe to you and the readers and users of your financial statements how that fund balance has been earmarked for the future. First category is non-spendable, just under $500,000. That's activity that has not had an income statement effect but will in future years. So this might be like a prepaid expense, so cash has gone out the door as of year end, but really it's for an expenditure that'll take place in the following year. You have about $6,000 of restricted fund balance, so that fund balance being held for a specific purpose. And then you have committed, assigned, and unassigned that really make the unrestricted categories or the reserves of the general fund. Committed, about $217,000, and that's formalized action by you that sets aside a part of fund balance to be funded for a specific purpose in the future. Just over $1 million of assigned fund balance. Again, that's a little bit less of authoritative decisions that go into allocating into that bucket. And then the last being unassigned, the true reserve, undesignated amount in the general fund, just over $10 million. The next page here, I do give you a look at And this, when you see the term again, unrestricted fund balance, that's combining that committed, assigned, and unassigned category into a bucket. I like to take that total unrestricted fund balance and divide it by the true expenditures of the general fund to determine really how much do you have in the reserves to support your expenditures at a given point in time. And there's 75% of the expenditures sitting in fund balance. Our recommendation, the GFOA's recommendation, is somewhere between at least 10 to 25%. So really, I say 3 months of operating costs. Now, I have communities that are significantly below the 10% recommendation, and like you, above that. And so it's not a bad thing to be above or to be below, but it's important to understand why we are below or why we're above, and how we might be using that fund balance in the future. And so in the current market, in the debt space, interest is very expensive in borrowing money. And so we have fund balance to consider to be used for upcoming projects. And so there's certainly no concern to note in the level of fund balance that you have, but important to know that as you consider the projects, it's an option to be used if you deem necessary. Continuing on, we have next slide here, just looking at your outstanding general obligation debt. You do have the ability to borrow up to 5% of your equalized value, and that equates out to about $158 million. You have 44 million outstanding. So in a growing community that is not landlocked in any sense, you are very light on debt and in a very good, strong financial position from a debt perspective when I compare you to other entities. So no concern here to note.
Could you scroll down a little bit so we can see the
Of course,
bottom
yeah,
of that
sorry
one?
about that.
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Give you a minute before moving on. But obviously, over the last 3 years, you've had a significant number of projects that you've leveraged with debt activity, and that's why you do see that number going up. The last few slides, I won't spend much time to go through, but I do summarize the TIF activity in TIF 4, 5, 6, and 7, the sources of funds that are coming in, the ultimate use of those funds. Towards the bottom here, you can see any long-term debt that's been taken out within the TIFs. And then the line below that, the fund balance as of year end. All those debts will be paid back certainly with increment in the future as those start to generate and get off the ground. Last two slides that I have for you focus around rate of return in the electric and water utility. There are authorized return rates, and I know that's something that management looks and follows closely, and so no concerns here to note or to dive into further. And so we'll slide out of that and open it up if you have any questions for me, but otherwise, most important to know is we just appreciate the opportunity to work with you and management. But happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alderman Rozak.
Hey, Paul, thanks.
Yeah.
Every year, that's usually pretty good news. We appreciate your efforts. A couple questions I had as I was looking through the documents. I may have asked this at some point. Is this your 5th year or 6th year doing our audit?
Is our
More than that?
7th? Does that sound right? 17? Okay, so,
Okay.
yeah,
So that's 16?
yeah.
6 years? Okay. Overall, obviously, everything looks good. Despite our efforts to spend the money, apparently, we keep having our fund balance increasing, which is not a bad thing, given the borrowing aspects. I like that we could save money on short-term borrowing if we borrow from ourselves for, various projects. But one thing I think we lose sight of in our city when we get into budget years, we have a lot of pretty heated discussion and debate about what we're going to cut, what we're not going to cut, what we're going to reduce and not reduce. And I think our audit has shown the fruit of those labors. Namely, if you look on page 19, we have an increase of $915,000 from the previous year going into that unfunded general reserve. As noted by the auditor, this increase is due to increased interest rates, so that's nothing we can control necessarily, and permit revenues in conjunction with conservative budgeting and spending efforts throughout the city. So that's really the efforts of our department heads, but also the city council, maintaining control of the budget and doing the right thing by the citizens so that we do have a rainy day fund. The one thing I will note, and this isn't just, hey, kudos to us, but permit revenue has been up. We made some really smart decisions a few years ago to bring back some of the permit revenue. And with the boom in housing that we've seen in Oconomowoc, that permit revenue increase to the city's been substantial. So we have to keep making the right decisions, and I think we should, continue to try to spend that money down for appropriate projects, but, also look to maybe tax cuts this year. So I'd love to see an executive budget with a tax cut this year.
Alderman Mulder.
Yeah, so if Lou was here, he would talk to the people at home, but Lou's not here, so I'll talk to the people at home. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line, we're required to keep 25% of our expenditures in unrestricted, is that correct?
Internal.
So 4.4, so we have roughly $7 million in excess, which our state has $7 billion excess. And people are, so I agree with you, Matt. I think that this is, there's nothing wrong with it, but it also, to what end? I mean, if we get to 90% or 100%, then do we take a year off and not have taxes? Like, there's a point at which this is, it's unneeded security, right? And we should be talking about priorities. We have a lot of things we want to do. We have road issues, so I think it's appropriate. I mean, tax cuts hard because you don't take it, you never get it again. So, but I think that we definitely should be looking at how we use this resource we have rather than just continuing to grow it, because it's up $2 million in 5 years.
Agreed.
Right. I agree.
Alderman
I
Schulpepper.
would agree with Alderman Mulder and say, right, if you don't take it, you'll never get it again, but we're also taking it and not needing it and continuing it to stack on. We don't necessarily have to always do the net new construction and take the full levy increase just because we want to buffer up our own levy. I don't think that's right, especially when it's clearly not always being used and we're increasing our unrestricted reserve, right? So.
But I think these are good discussions. These are our primary discussions we're going to have in our budget cycle. As we look at that, and actually as we talked about how to use those reserve funds, and then how do we go forward. So I think those are awesome comments, and definitely going to have a lot of work in front of us so we know the consequences of what we want to do. Alderman Spiegelberg.
And I agree with what you guys are saying, but we also have to be careful because we may come to a year where we don't have a net new construction, or we have a very small net new construction where we'll have to dig into those reserves. A lot of communities are coming up upon that now, and we may get to that point. We've been really blessed in Oconomowoc to have a pretty high net new construction number. Couple things. You had asked how long they've been on board with us, and I wanted to remind you that we did put out an RFP last November. Baker Tilly and 2 other firms that had applied, one that was just clearly not at the level of what we need here in Oconomowoc. The other one, maybe so-so, but these guys blew us away with their RFP. And so I just want to remind you guys, we did put that back out for bid again.
Okay.
Okay, and then I had a question for Paul, and good to see you again, Paul. So on the executive summary on the first page, you had said, additionally, we have included information on key risk areas the city of Oconomowoc should be aware of in your strategic planning. We are available to discuss these risks as they relate to your organization's financial stability and future planning. Are there any of those that you can touch on a high level or expound on any of those tonight? I mean, are those covered on page 5, or some of those covered on page 5?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
they're detailed
Okay.
out in there, and they're really for any organization that we go in and audit from a governmental standpoint, they are the same. So it's revenue recognition and management override of the controls. And so through that transaction cycle that we dive into, as I alluded to, nothing came out. Now, from the operation side standpoint, there's certainly other things that we can discuss that I can bring other individuals to if you want to discuss more organizational type stuff. But at this point, I think management's given you everything that you need on
Okay.
that front, so.
Appreciate that. Thank
Of
you.
course. Did you have something that?
Not any other questions? Just one of the things, year-end review, you're right, we did add to the fund balance again this year, and as Hannah pointed out in the financial statements, the main reason this year was interest and building permits. One of the things I want to point out is that these revenue excesses that we've had over the last few years don't have anything to do with our taxes. They have to do with operating results from interest or building permits or something like that, but not the level of taxes that we have out there. And that Mark and the mayor and I have been talking, and we'll talk at capital planning this year about how to take a look at those few $1 million that we have there and what's the best way to move forward with that and save us money by not using it and not having to borrow money and pay the high interest costs. So that's all conversations that are coming up.
I can't wait for those conversations. 'cause,
It'll be
you know,
good.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
It'll be good. Oh, it'll be good. Well, thank you.
One more quick question on the audit. The donations from the individual organizations that were $51,000 less, it's on page 21 of the full packet, the pilot. Can we identify that organization?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be for Towner Crest, and the reason is because of the assessment change. They're tax exempt, they didn't get an assessment change like everyone else did. So basically, with the mill rate going down, they paid less in pilot last year because they're paying on their assessed value. So this next year, as Towner Crest is moving forward with a expansion, a little expansion on their building, we did let them know that we were sending the assessors out there to do the reassessment on them as well.
Any other questions,
Oh,
comments?
thank you.
Alderman Ellis?
No, you know what? I'll wait.
Okay.
It's not necessary.
Thank you both very much.
Yeah, and then I have to say, a big thanks for our annual reports to my accounting managers, John Shu and Hannah Brosh, who put all of this together and take care of those journal entries for you all year long. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to public comments. I have a few blue cards. Once I state your name, if you come up to the podium, state your name and address, and you have approximately 3 minutes to share your thoughts and opinions with the entire council. It's a one-way dialogue, and we welcome anyone here in the community to join us. We're going to start off with Stan Riffle.
You folks all have under your,
What's your address?
well, I live in Oconomowoc Lake, but what I'm announcing
Oh, no, I
tonight
don't want to hear anything.
is that I just closed on a property at the Stoneview condominiums at 320 Pleasant Street, and now I am a proud owner of property in this city, and I'm very happy to be here. My mother-in-law, 80 years old, will be moving up from Missouri, and I'm going to make sure that she comes to every council meeting to watch you in action and tell you how great you are.
Ian,
She'd be in District 2.
Stoneview's 320 Pleasant Street.
I think that's
Oh,
you.
yeah, that's me, right?
That's you and
That's
you.
2.
That's you guys.
That's 2.
All right.
Okay, she'll have you over for
Knock on your
coffee.
door. All right.
On to Terry Burke.
You should see their faces.
Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Real quickly, this is has to do with the old Highlander subdivision going in behind us, Briarwood subdivision, there's a surprise. The biggest issue we have, obviously, is it sounds like everything is well underway. The architectural approval of what the buildings look like, a little concerned about, it's a little vague. I've heard the last time we were here, they wanted to carry forward what they had on Summit, to paraphrase, sort of carry that same theme. Don't know if that's true. I looked at the Newman's renditions. Those look okay. I mean, they had different colors on them. There was some character to the buildings, multiple dwellings. What I would like to avoid is what we have that I drive by every morning over near Pap's Farm, that are just these white barracks, for lack of a better term, that are just lined. They're just not very good looking. You got an opportunity with the geography and everything there to do a really nice job. Just even paint colors would make a difference. But of course, my biggest concern, you probably haven't heard this one before, is McKinsey Lane. You've got the Bishop's Road, I forget what the name it is. Anyway, you're building a brand-new road coming out to Oconomowoc Parkway. Oconomowoc Parkway will eventually go through to the other side. Fine and good, but McKinsey is really a stretch. It's a small, tight little subdivision we live in. A lot of kids, a lot of elderly, that'd be me, that do the walking around there, a lot of dog walking, no sidewalks. We don't need sidewalks, but it would be tough if we had a lot of traffic on that. I'd like to, understand more as we get closer why we need that open to Oconomowoc Parkway and then through back to the subdivision. That's all I had to say. You guys have a good one.
Thank you. Jerry Erdman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jerry Erdman, 372 River Bluff Circle, Oconomowoc. I've moved to Oconomowoc in 1967, and I've watched a lot of development happen here in the city. And anyone who knows me knows I'm not opposed to development, but I am concerned about proper infrastructure, especially roads, sidewalks, and bike paths. And I think from when I was sitting where Alderman Mulder is back in the 90s, we planned the Oconomowoc Parkway. And we also talked about residential collector streets such as Lapham, Lisbon, Highway Z, which is Lake Drive, Silver Lake Street, Valley Road, Concord. These were residential collector streets. And back when I was a kid, there was no development out there. I mean, the old Unishelter built the old subdivision across from, I guess where St. Jerome's is now. There was a few homes there, but other than that, there was nothing west of Silver Lake Street. Well, in the 90s, when we talked about Silver Lake Street being a residential collector street, when everything developed, that was supposed to be widened. There was supposed to be bike paths. Lapham Street up here was supposed to be widened with bike paths. Lake Drive was supposed to go through. All these things, a lot of these things, as different councils, not everybody that's sitting here, they kept letting things go and did not require developers to put that infrastructure in. But we planned the Oconomowoc Parkway, and that parkway is very critical to what we have done for development in the city and where the city is going with future development. Roads need to connect. It is poor planning not to build the infrastructure when you're gonna add all the development that we're adding. And, we finally got Thackeray Trail in, which I've been watching since the 1960s. And we finally got it in, and it hasn't been as big of an impact as people said it would be. What happens is people will use different routes at different times depending where they're going. If I'm in Paps Farms and I want to go to the Silver Lake School, I might hit the Parkway. My daughter lives in the subdivision across from the St. Jerome's. Now the Thackeray Trail's in, she goes to Walgreens or something, she goes down Thackeray. If she's going to go to 94, she'll jump out Valley Road. If the Parkway's in and she's gonna go to Sendex or something, she might drive down the Parkway. People will go in different directions. I'm in River Bluff, so if I'm gonna go to 94, I don't drive down Valley Road, I drive down BB to DR and then out to the highway. So I just want to encourage this council. I read an article that they may be considering not doing the Parkway. I think that would be a huge mistake. Like I said, we've made tons of mistakes with Lapham, Lisbon, all these other roads. Silver Lake Street, these houses that are 25 feet off the residential collector street. Back in the 90s, residential collector streets were supposed to have 50-foot setbacks. We were supposed to widen those roads. And as Attorney Riffle knows, I sit on his committee at the county, and we've had to deal with a number of road issues in other communities where they have to do takings, and it's very expensive. So I would encourage the council to connect all the roads, start thinking about bike paths, sidewalks, and connectivity so we can disperse the traffic as we develop. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Williamson.
All right, going a little different direction here. I want to say thank you again to the committee for providing us the opportunity to comment publicly on the proposed ordinance 23-01046 on third-party gift card procurement. My name is Emily Williamson. I'm the corporate affairs manager for Metro Market and Pick and Save stores. And I also want to introduce Mark Elliott is our Division Vice President of Operations. With me here tonight, he oversees store operations for South Central Wisconsin. I also want to thank Chief Pfister in the back for scheduling meetings with our team so that we can share ideas together and look at opportunities to continue to build awareness of this community concern. As I proposed the last meeting, we want to create a community partnership to address safety and fraud prevention in our stores. To provide additional expertise, we've also included in our conversations 2 additional subject matter experts: the leader of our fraud prevention team at Kroger Personal Finance, as well as the Vice President of Legal for Blackhawk Network, who is a provider of omnichannel gift card solutions for numerous retailers. From our continued conversations, we appreciate the team's desire to create a solution for community via an ordinance and the transparency in acknowledging that this solution is currently imperfect. The current ordinance focuses on credit card theft, leaving victim-assisted fraud as an opportunity. To address these continued opportunities, we have Chief Pfister's support on the following. We're going to work together to create an awareness campaign. Our stores are available to host tables to support. We see the highest percentage of senior shoppers on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We also are planning a 6-month review. We propose a 6-month window to work together with our partners across the industry, preferably before implementing legislation, and appreciate Chief Pfister for providing us the opportunity to revisit and replace or amend legislation at that 6-month marker. We also, in planning for that, we will be scheduling monthly touch bases to share updates on our approach and data from the prior month. Chief Pfister has graciously offered to investigate his case history as well so that we can continue to utilize this crime data in our approach. Our focus as an organization is to provide safe, enjoyable shopping experience to the law-abiding citizens while best protecting the shoppers in our business from fraud. We do have many safeguards in place today to prevent gift card fraud and act quickly when an instance is reported. From dollar per transaction thresholds, associate training, intervention practices, and the monitoring of data at our corporate level. We're also proud of our successes, and in the past year, Oconomowoc, we have no reported fraud. This includes any cases reported at store level or through our customer center. We also look at chargebacks to the financial institutions following purchases. We do have anecdotal data of the instances where our teams have stopped fraud or shoppers have engaged with our in-store Protect Yourself from Fraud signage. While we continue to advocate for postponing the voting on Ordinance 23-01046 tonight to support a community awareness campaign while Blackhawk Network gathers data from retailers across the industry along with review of other city ordinances to the impact of other city ordinances so that together we can craft a preferred solution to address what we are seeing today as well as prepare us for the future. Thank you again to Chief Pfister, Administrator Fry, Attorney Riffle for their commitment to addressing this topic, their support of the Oconomowoc community, and their willingness to meet with our team to discuss this topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane Owen.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yep. Also, I did not choose to go last for the record. This is multiple times because I had it thrown in my face about going last. My topic is city government spending and that you're about to miss your 3rd session in a year and still get paid for yourself. So is it a pay raise without telling the taxpayers, or is it quiet quitting? Before the mayor took office 4 years ago, every alderman had 3 committees. Now it's 1 to 2. And oftentimes they miss a committee so that the alderman comes back uninformed, unaware, uneducated, no representation or knowledge to bring. There are still committees without any aldermanic representation instead of some consistency and transparency. I think that if you don't make a full council session, lose $200 in pay. Miss a committee, miss $100 in pay. No work, no pay. One person commented to me, nobody wants to be on a committee, but they were in record in the newspaper last week for saying, this is fun when we do the hard work. Within City Hall and work areas, we need minimum hiring standards. Highly skilled at Microsoft Office, computer programs, new apps, new programs, not just wait for an intern to do it and say, well, I don't know how. That should be part of marketing to keep your job and keep your department at the level it is. All new created jobs need to be part-time or 2 part-times instead of 1. You get more work hours for the same amount of money. Monitoring software on your productivity in City Hall and other work areas across the city. It's been done at state level. Let's see if we're getting our money's worth. Are you active, whether you're at home or working in your office, for the hours and days you're getting paid? You used to have a glowing small city. Now the water quality is poor to the point where at Lac La Belle, there's a DNR warning not to consume fish more than once a month. Used to be panfish in there, bluegill, crappie. Now it's catfish and bottom feeders. Too much salt brine on the roads so that the right-of-ways are all dead grass. Land grab, expanding the right-of-way in some areas from 30 to 33 feet, up to 50 feet on each side of the center line. City can't afford what they've got now. They're $44 million in debt, as we just heard tonight. 5 years ago, it was about $4 million in debt. If you can't afford what you have now, don't spend more. The water treatment plants dumping waste north of the city, so it flows right back in and we have to treat it again. Our water quality is gone. We got new laptops and microphones for council, but you have 3 screens here. You could bring your laptop, you've got the overhead screen, and you've got the screen in front of you. That's repetition. You don't need 3 screens. But one alderman lost the tablet they had for 6 months. Didn't make it public. I'm sure there's tracers on it. We need to tie up loose ends. There's a giant pothole on North Lake Road. That tit or tiff should have been closed February 7th when they publicly announced it.
If you could wrap up, please.
Sure. He promised to come back in 1 to 2 months. Still haven't heard anything. Had a department head give their word 2 full years ago for the Architecture Committee to make recommendations to council on the required by state law local ordinance on historic buildings. But Historical Society doesn't give out legal advice.
If you could wrap up, please.
That's the first thing he'll tell you. We still haven't heard it in 2 years. Council's not doing their job. We have uncontrolled and unsustainable growth. Let's focus on our core competencies. Get to work and do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? That was the last blue card I had. Any other comments from the community? Not hearing or seeing anything, we'll move on to consent agenda items, licenses for license approval. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved, Rozek.
Second, Altman Cloth.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? On to committee reports, finance. Consider act on resolution 23-R3137, approving city funding for off-leash dog park in Roosevelt Park and budget amendment. Mr. Hepner.
Good evening. I'm just smiling because I'm happy. I want to talk about the dog park. So 2 weeks ago, we had a council agenda item that we approved an off-leash dog park concept at Roosevelt Park. And at the time, the council expressed potential interest in helping fund part of the project. So some quick stats. The project is expected to cost about $150,000. Much of that is for fencing, our entry and exit gates, and a water line for a drinking fountain for both dogs and people. We have an informal group of definitely invested community members that have been working hard on this and starting to fundraise for it. But obviously it's a large project. So tonight what we're talking about is potentially matching up to $75,000 of donated funds from this group and from the community. So again, it's up to $75,000. This would come from what's the general fund unrestricted reserves, which is good timing. You just went through that, which is also noticed as a fund balance. It's a capital fund project through Parks Playgrounds capital improvements. And so staff is recommending approving a budget amendment transferring up to $75,000 from this fund. And I'd be happy to answer questions and entertain discussion.
Any questions from council? Reminder that this is a budget amendment and needs a supermajority vote to pass. Alderman Shellpepper?
How do we feel about the fundraising efforts?
Actually very good. We've met with the committee now about 4 times this calendar year. There's at least 3 donations people are ready to make. The group will be working with the Friends of Connewauk Parks and Trails to run the fund holding part of it, 501c3. And so I think once we get, they wanted to hear the conceptual approval last week. They would love to hear this tonight to give them a shot in the arm and a great boost towards it. But I know there's 3 good gifts already ready to come. And I think between this and those gifts, it would really knock us out of the park pretty quickly. Obviously, there's many, many dog owners in our community, and I think they're going to see the need and the enjoyment in this location and turning, I'll call our own blighted area, which is the parks and DPW yard, into a usable recreation space.
So would you say the reason we're doing the budget amendment tonight then is because there's a urgent need to get the funding in place to start fundraising efforts? And if we didn't pass this tonight, that funding raising efforts would be significantly delayed and the project could be postponed for a longer period of time?
I'll say it this way. I think it's similar to how we did the skate park, where the city supported it to a certain level, and then the community came forward and knocked that out of the park as well, obviously much more than we thought. So this gives, just like that, it gives that committee a great boost for it. I don't think it will say, I won't say it's going to delay the project substantially if you don't approve it, but it certainly makes it happen in 2023, this fall, or early 2024.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to outline why the budget amendment, is being made, in that it's not just like a flippant decision and that it's based on kind of extenuating circumstances. That's why we're doing the budget amendment and not going through the typical capital process.
Yeah, so in last year's capital projects, you did approve this project as one of the capital projects.
Right.
And it was listed as $75,000 of donations, so private donations. So knowing that the costs are really about 150, that's part of the reason.
Alderman Mulder?
I know when in committee you talked about funding some of the upkeep with potential annual fee. I know that when you presented this originally, it's hard to police whether someone has a sticker. I know, and I think there's been talk of tying that to the dog license, that would be part of that. Is that viable? Otherwise, I'm not really sure how you collect fees on this if it's not part of some sort of licensure. Otherwise, you're just counting on people's goodwill.
Right, it's typical to tie it to that. Past experience shows if you can do it with your dog licenses, whether it's required or not, that's usually where it can happen. The fees in this case, and that's something we sent back to the committee, the park board actually did, said we'd like to understand that a little bit better, and also rules and regulations for the park itself. So they're going to bring that forward. We do need to do some more investigation with city staff and how we can handle that financially. But that's typical, and it's typical that the fees then would go back towards the park to maintain it. So doggy waste bags and other amenities like that would not have to come out of a city budget, then it goes from that fund.
Alderman Altman-Cloth?
Just get me now. I was just going to kind of answer Shell Peppers, but I think you did a good job.
Okay, Alderman Rozak?
Yeah, I think the reason, I think part of the reason we're doing the budget amendment now is it's moving forward, and we had talked about this during the capital funding process, so that's why I think this one's probably okay in my head. If we get the fundraising comes in pretty quick, what's the timeline? I mean, when could we accomplish the
Yeah.
fencing and the park?
I think the next step, then the only main obstacle is we still have a yard we need to clean up, which was part of a capital project budget. But I think it's just getting quotes and bids on fencing is ultimately the big cost. Working with utilities and water lines, we can start doing some of that work pretty quickly if we know that's going to be a reality. And then it's a matter of us as a staff getting that cleaned up and moving operations a bit.
Okay.
It's,
Alderman-
as I said, I'm sorry. I was
Oh,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
it's about a 12 to 14 acre parcel. We would have room for both small breed dogs, large breed dogs. It's a nice system, and it's what I like about the property is using kind of an unused space for the public. There's trees, there's be grasslands, there's be trails. It's kind of a combination of all of those.
Great, thank you, Craig.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
So it says transferring up to 75,000, where we would be matching what is coming in. So I'm assuming then, let's say 20 comes in on donations, then we're transferring 20. We're not transferring, just as a clarification, we're not transferring the entire 75,000 tonight.
Right, I'd agree with it, and maybe we pick a date that whatever that is, arbitrary September 1st, December 1st, something like that, but I think as the money comes in, so if we do get a $20,000 donation, a lead donation, we can match that. If we get another 5 or 10, I don't want to do it every time there's $500 or $200.
no.
But just incrementally like that, up to $75,000.
Any other questions or comments?
And the
Alderman Maroney.
75 from the city, 75,000, that would be applicable for the match? I mean, that would be the amount, total amount we would need?
Correct.
We
And we
wouldn't need to
wouldn't
exceed that at all?
No, similar to the skate park, great example, we had 125,000 from the city and 125,000 originally from donations. As it grew and got better, the rest of it came from donations. We ended up at 450,000. We didn't come back to the city and we're not going to ask for more money, but that let the group, so if the dog park all of a sudden say, hey, we want to do this great thing and it costs 200,000, that's up to them to come up with it. You're saying you're going to match up to that level and be done.
Like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further comments, questions? Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder?
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper?
Aye.
Alderman Maroney?
Aye.
Alderman Douglas?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next up, consider act on resolution 23-R3138 approving the flock camera system purchase using contingency funds with, again, a budget amendment. So this will require a supermajority vote. Chief Pfister.
Thank you, Mayor. We are bringing forward today the 2023 budget amendment for flock camera system. The flock safety automatic license plate recognition, otherwise known as LPR cameras and vehicle fingerprint technology. We had previously discussed this once before in a budget process. This camera system is a great system helping fight crime. About 70% of crime involves a vehicle, so this would greatly help us in identifying those vehicles. We obtained a quote from Flock for these at a cost of $3,000 a camera and an installation price of $2,600, making the total amount of $14,600 and a continuing ongoing cost yearly of $12,000 a year. The system can also be purchased by HOAs through other businesses where they could put it on their property as well, and we would be able to access that information. Tonight, we do have a representative from Flock that I would like to bring up at this time and do a short presentation.
Please do so. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Amy Cornell.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm happy to be here with you tonight. As Chief mentioned, my name is Amy Cornell. I'm a Community Affairs Manager at Flock Safety, and really wanted to tell you a little bit about the technology, how it works, and of course be able to answer any questions that you may have as well. So I'll go through this brief presentation and talk through how the system works, and then feel free to ask any questions that I can help with. So the mission of Flock Safety is really to eliminate crime for the whole community. And to tell you a little bit about our company and how we started, our president and CEO actually he started the company back in 2017. And the reason that he started this is because he and his neighbors were victims of crimes. So it was car break-ins, burglaries, and this was in Atlanta, and that's where the company is headquartered, but is now all over the United States. But at that time, he was really looking for an effective, an affordable, and a system that was also very ethical, and that's something that's been very important to when the company started to date. So one of the things that, the evidence that he was able to bring to the police in Atlanta was video evidence. And they said, well, this is great, but would really help us solve crimes is to have a license plate. So they weren't able to solve a lot of the crimes going on in his neighborhood. So that's just a little bit of background on the company. And then what we're looking at today, as you know, we have limited police resources here and everywhere in the country, yet crime is still on the rise. This is a way to really use technology to multiply the force, and it captures objective evidence. I'll kind of go through a little bit how that works and how the technology is used. So what you're seeing here, this photograph here of the vehicle is exactly the type of picture that would be sent to law enforcement. So this is the back of a vehicle. What is being picked up here is the license plate, the make and model, and of course a timestamp of where this camera is. So there is no personal identifying information. It's not used for any traffic enforcement. It's not tied to any sort of database. It's strictly just the back of a car. You couldn't tell who is driving that car. There's no filter for people. So it's objective evidence from fixed locations. And we refer to that as a vehicle fingerprint. So I've talked a little bit about what the technology is. I think it's equally as important, if not more important, to tell you what the technology doesn't do. As I mentioned, it's not tied to any personal identifiable information. There's no facial recognition used here, not used for traffic enforcement, and the data isn't stored beyond 30 days. So it's securely stored, encrypted end-to-end, and it's stored in the Amazon Web Services cloud, which is the most secure you can get for government. It's used by the FBI and the CIA, and that's something that is stored for 30 days unless it's something that the police are able to use. It has to be tied to a crime to be able to save that evidence. Otherwise, it's in the cloud, nobody sees it, and it goes away. So how the technology prevents and eliminates crime, it's proactive. The police can get real-time alerts within a matter of seconds as stolen vehicles or vehicles involved in some type of crime enter the city, as well as investigative, decreasing crime rates, and the flock cameras also act as a deterrent. So if folks know who are coming into the city where the cameras are, they're less likely to commit a crime there. One of the things that I had mentioned is ethics and mitigating risk. So protecting privacy is something that is very important to flock safety, and we have taken a lot of measures to make sure that that happens. So some of the ways we do that, the footage is owned strictly by the police department. Flock never sees this footage. We don't have access to it, and it is not shared with anybody. That it's owned by the police department. It also takes the human bias out of the crime solving. So as I mentioned, the objective data, you're just getting a picture of the back of the vehicle. I also mentioned that data is stored securely in the cloud, encrypted end-to-end. And one thing that I think is really important to point out that I touched on a little bit is a search reason there needs to be a search reason to be able to pull up anything. So you can't just sit and pull all the cars that are coming through a certain camera. You can't pull that information and look at it. You really it needs to be tied to a case. So it needs to be either triggered by a call. Say the police get a call from a citizen, says, I saw this red Honda involved in this crime, it's a stolen vehicle, that's a search reason. So something like that it would need to be tied to. And then not tied to any car registration data, any third-party databases, Carfax, DMV, nothing like that. I also wanted to touch on something that we offer called the Transparency Portal. And what this is part of the package. It's offered to every department that uses our technology. So what this is, you could customize it for your agency, but you could include audits, and you can do an audit, you can do one every day, you can do one every week, every month, as often or as frequently as you think is necessary, or want to share the information of how the technology is used. So this is something you can take your information that you pull from the audits and you can put it in the Transparency Portal, you can put it on your website, Facebook page, share with the community, and that will show how the technology is used, how many hits, how the searches are being done, what other agencies throughout the area or throughout the state that are sharing this data with the police department, and really helps to kind of explain to the public and for anyone who might be interested that this is how the technology works and just a way of being transparent. This is a slide that we put together just to show you how many other agencies throughout the state are currently utilizing flock safety. So all of these agencies that you see here, and we have some clips from, as you can see from the news there as well. So want to go through some actual real-life examples to show you some of the different types of crimes that Flock can help address and solve. So this is an attempted homicide case out of Beaver Dam, and as you can, I won't read all of this for you, but it was basically this suspect was taken into custody thanks to an officer was able to access the Flock camera system, and was able to track down this individual and thankfully capture him using that camera technology. We also use it for, it's not just stolen cars. Actually, a lot of missing people we've used this to recover and locate a lot of missing people. This is one out of Port Washington, and this is a silver alert, so it's an older adult that somebody called in, was able to say this is what they were driving, Flock camera picked it up, and they were able to find this person safely and reunite them with their family. This is one that shows a little bit of the preventative side of the technology. So this is in a little bit further away in San Bruno, California. It was a jewelry store robbery, and these suspects walked into a jewelry store. The owner of the store was able to fend them off, but the police there were concerned that they might escalate and it might get worse. So they put the vehicle description on a custom hot list. And what happened then is they did come back and were able to be stopped in the parking lot, and they prevented another robbery that could have been much more violent. This is another example that I just want to close on. This is out of Chamblee, Georgia. And this is a stranger-on-stranger abduction, which is actually very rare, but this mother was pushing her child in a stroller down the street, and two masked and armed individuals came up and snatched the child and threw the child in the car and drove away. She was not able to get the license plate, but she did get a description of the vehicle. And so because of that, that vehicle was able to go into the Flock system. It was tracked down a state away in Alabama, and within 6 hours, less than 6 hours actually, she was reunited with her baby, and the baby was unharmed. Apparently, these two people were planning to raise the child as their own, so thankfully he was reunited with his mother. And then this is just a snapshot for you. The cameras are completely infrastructure free. They are solar powered, and they can really go in a lot of different locations. So these are just some photos to show you what they might look like in the community and the different ways that you can put them up in the community. And that concludes the PowerPoint. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Council, if you have any questions for our Flock representative or for Chief Pfister. Alderman Maroney.
Just basically for our needs as our city, we're looking at it as vehicle recognition. As far as solving other crimes that may not come through our main corridors, it's basically for vehicles. Is that, I mean, other crimes? I mean, I'm just trying to get a.
Sure.
idea.
It's all the above.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, Highway 67 is a main corridor for us, so we do get a lot of traffic that comes in, and we get reports of, you know, they're getting on the interstate, you know. So, you know, crime occurs, and, you know, they're heading down 67, they go east or west on the interstate. So this would actually help us with that as well, so.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Question that I should have thought of in committee, but why Flock? Do you have competitors? Are there other companies that do this same thing that we should be considering? Or how did, Chief Pfister, how did you come to Flock? This is the one we need to, you know, look at.
Yeah, really, we looked at this, and the communities that are in, the communities that are surrounding us have all gone with Flock, and to integrate with them so that we can all work together as a web is why we decided to continue to stay with Flock.
Alderman Mulder.
So in the marketing materials you provided us, it talks a lot about HOAs using this, and that was something I think that piqued our interest. And I'm wondering about that. It feels like there could be a bit of vigilantism associated with that. If an HOA can see a car, they're not really doing anything, but they're suspecting it. Like how much kind of negative feedback do police get from HOAs that are suspecting something's going on because an unfamiliar vehicle is there and they track it down, and it just, the environment we're in, that seems like it could be prevalent.
Yes, so that's a great question. So the HOAs that we do work with, almost all of them integrate with law enforcement. So they're not actually doing the policing themselves, but they're allowing law enforcement to be able to access their cameras. So if they do have, an HOA, for example, can create their own custom hot list, but that would all go directly to law enforcement. So the HOAs wouldn't be actually the ones actively pursuing a vehicle or anything like that.
But in your marketing materials, it says that you can go on and quickly search. It says the HOA can go on and quickly search. So if I'm the HOA president and I have access to this, I can go watch that camera and see which car was there. I mean, that's where it starts to break down for me. I understand it. There's a lot of value in this. I can clearly see it. I worry about the overstep that comes with it. And like we said in committee, it's not with our police force that I'm concerned about. It's other areas. But I'm really interested in Chris's opinion because he's the expert here. But
So I guess I would address the first one with the HOA. I think the better way of doing that is the HOA makes a donation to the police department then pays for the camera. I think that would be the route to go that way, if that's the concern. To answer your question, Karen, there is another system out there. That system is mostly used for traffic enforcement, and I'll tell you that between the two systems, Flock is, for the investigation portion, is far better to pick up vehicles, descriptions, colors, I mean, all that stuff. So an investigative tool, I mean, Flock is the better system.
But I think, Council, it's being brought up, and those are great comments. It's important that if we allow this to go with HOAs, then that's a whole nother discussion. Because I think you brought up, Matt Mulder, quite a few good questions there, and maybe some solutions from Alderman Douglas. Alderman Shellpepper.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for bringing the proposal forward. Like, it's a very serious issue. It has very real-world implications for the quality of life that we enjoy in Oconomowoc. It's a decision we should take, very seriously, that we should consider very carefully. It's a significant change from how we conduct policing currently in the city of Oconomowoc in terms of the technology that's being used. So I think it is a change. I think it's important we take a hard look at the public safety benefits of it, like I said. I want to catch criminals in our community. I want to catch people that are going to hurt people that have hurt people. I don't want to catch every innocent person's traffic pattern that's commuting through the city for 30 days. I don't want the FBI and the ATF to have a direct line of sight into our community, so the next time the governor issues a stay-at-home order for the next pandemic, we can easily and quickly be unconstitutionally deprived of our civil liberties. I want to catch criminals. I want to catch people doing bad things. I worry about encroachment, and just like the things that I said, I'm wanting to have an opportunity for the community to be aware of this decision, just more time. I think there's a lot of good that could be used for the system, but I also want the opportunity for this body, which which is the governing body for this city. This would be a government technology that we're putting on our people. They should be able to at least know that and provide some feedback to know that this is what their government's doing. And then the government should have a role, I think, to a certain extent in crafting, because I don't think there's state laws necessarily that govern the use of this technology very much. And I think that's a shame. I just did like a quick preliminary search. It seems like New Hampshire has a law. Basically, any non-hit license plates within 3 minutes need to be deleted. So any license plate you don't already currently have, somebody you want to get for whatever, then that's deleted within 3 minutes, as opposed to 30 days. And do we want to craft policies where it's not the ATF and the FBI that can just get this whenever they want, even though eventually if we put it in there, there could be those orders in place for these mandates that I'm talking about. We have a lot of gun shows in town. Is the ATF going to promulgate a new weapons law that's completely unconstitutional and want to track the people that are going to the gun shows? These are all opportunities that, you know, will be present with the technology that we'd be implementing. So I think, like I said, the Flock representative, appreciate you presenting great concrete solutions or examples of how this has helped people. It definitely can help, and it can keep people safe. You know, there's parts of that I don't dispute. There's 97 municipalities and counties currently using it in Wisconsin, you said. There's almost 1,900 counties and municipalities in Wisconsin, so we're just about 5% of those counties and municipalities that are using your technology. So it's not like it's everybody that's using it. It is still a small fraction. So that's why I just look for some more deliberation. This was originally in the capital budget for '24. It got bumped up very quickly. I have more questions, but I'd like to, you know, let everybody else have the opportunity.
Well, I would like to actually hear the response, because if I interpreted you correctly, is you really want to make sure about accessibility of this information.
Well, I
And
want to make
what-
sure there's
and-
safeguards in place to make sure that we're being very strict on who it could be shared with, if we're going to do it at all. I mean, and here's the other thing. So if Governor Evers, you know, or whoever governor it is, promulgates the next stay-at-home order, and we're violating it by being out driving, could your technology be used to identify who's driving and violating that stay-at-home order? And report it to the police and enforced?
Right. The system requires a legitimate case to go into it, to be looking up, you know, what we're doing. That's part of the audit. We would put a policy in place for our department that would have such restrictions in there that we're not going in and just going and looking at, hey, who's driving by here every day? Who's doing this or who's doing that? I can tell you currently we are using this technology because we have it on our squad cars. We are catching license plates. We drive around. We catch license plates all the time. We go through parking lots. We go driving around. These are stationary ones. So we already have technology in our city, in our department that's doing this.
Using Flock.
Okay.
You're using
It
Flock
is not
right now.
Flock. It's not through Flock, okay? It's an Elper system. Do you know the company, Captain, the name of it? I'm not aware.
So
I can't
why are
think
you-
of the company.
well, I won't just
Okay.
interrupt you. Go ahead.
So we're currently using that technology already. We're looking to enhance that technology by putting stationary cameras throughout our city in the major areas. And I can tell you right now, the governor comes down with an order that says, we're gonna track this, I'm gonna cancel our contract with Flock, or I'll pull the plug out, okay? I'm not gonna let that happen, okay? We, as a community and as a city, have that ability to do that, okay? We can stop recording at any time we want.
That's why I just want to see that
Okay.
in ordinance, that we're establishing those guidelines and saying that. And here's the one thing, though, with the current technology we have, can it be shared with the thousands of other agencies that are currently on that system right now, and they can get into it right now without any
Our Elpers?
problem? Yeah.
We share with the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, so that is a difference too then in the Flock technology, because the Flock technology would be shared with every single.
No, Flock technology, I decide who it gets shared with.
But
We
that's-
cannot share our information with any community.
Right.
Or I could say we want the Lake Country area. Or I
Right.
could say just Waukesha County. I could say the state of Wisconsin, the whole United States, I could say.
I just want to,
You know.
those are things I want to outline, I guess, so.
Right.
in an
I mean, I
actual
guess,
ordinance.
and that's what I'm asking is, what questions do you truly have that we haven't answered? You know, is it
quite a
strictly,
few.
if it's strictly, we want public comment on this, and, you know, we'd like them to come in, Flock is more than willing to attend a public session for the, you know, to put it out there and have a discussion as well.
That'd be a great start. I mean,
So we have, I'm going to keep rolling around because we have about 5 aldermen that have questions. So we're going to start with Alderman Rozak.
Hey, Chief. Hey, thanks for bringing this and the card thing, which we're going to talk about later. It's two new things for us, and I think whenever you're talking about a new law enforcement ordinance, tactic, whatever, it certainly is engaging. But most of my questions are actually for Amy. Amy, I appreciate the goals to eliminate crime, but how many times is Flock served with subpoenas, warrants per year from federal, state, or other agencies? Do you guys get served with warrants and subpoenas for information?
I'm not, I have to get that information. I can get back to you on that.
I think that's an important question for us because that kind of goes to the step we talked about in the hearing, which is I'm okay with, you know, chief having access to this. I'm not as comfortable with, Timothy Ray or whatever at the FBI having access to this stuff.
What I will tell you is because the police department owns all the data and Flock never sees it, I don't believe that that happens often, if at all, but I'm happy to follow up for you.
I think that's a good question. I think that's a question a lot of folks would have, important for us to know. Does Flock contain software? Well, I guess let me ask this. Does Flock as a system contain enough memory and enough software components to be able to upgrade?
That's a great question. So it does, and as part of the package and the contract, when a department enters into a contract with Flock, that is part of it. You get the upgrades for the length of your contract. So the cameras themselves, information is stored for such a short time in them that it goes straight to the cloud or is sent to law enforcement if it's part of a crime. So the way it works is every software upgrade that Flock issues nationwide you would get.
And the second part of that question is not just software upgrades for its normal functionality, but is it upgradable to additional functionality? Storing longer, recording more data, doing facial recognition, does it have those additional capabilities in the future, or is it kind of static at kind of the service level we're getting?
I would say that the capabilities in the future would be related to software upgrades, but not to facial recognition. That's not the market that we are in or will be in the future.
How many cameras do you think you guys currently have out there in the US and Canada? Do you have kind of a general, tens of thousands?
2,000.
Okay.
2,000 jurisdictions have cameras. I don't know the
Okay.
number of
That's a
cameras,
lot.
but I can get that for you too.
That's a good one to get. One of the things you also said, and the chief mentioned this too, you said access is really limited to crimes, but that's not really the case, because what we're doing is if there's reasonable suspicion, we're going to access the camera because we have a report of someone with a silver Camry that was breaking into cars on, Paps Road on such and such time. So that person may not actually, they're being investigated for a crime, but a crime doesn't necessarily have to be committed to access it, correct?
So it would have to
If
be.
you know, Chief, I mean, whoever wants to answer that question.
Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Yes, but we do that all the time.
Right, I understand.
I mean, that's just the nature of police. If I didn't do that, we would catch anyone.
Right. I mean, you pull someone over for suspicion of DUI
Right.
or
But
drug
we look at
trafficking
ring
or-
cameras, we look at bank footage, we look at every store's footage that has roads trying to get a lead on the vehicle that was involved in that crime.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. One of the other thing you said is we wouldn't give access to others, but then Chief, you also did say that we are trying to integrate with other communities. So there is going to be some interaction, right? I mean, that's part of the goal of creating a more universal kind of CCT system, right?
Correct. But what I'm trying to say is, we haven't made the policy yet.
Right, I
Okay?
understand.
If this body directs me to say, we're not sharing it with anybody, then we're not sharing it with anybody, okay? Would I like to share it with our surrounding communities at least in Waukesha County? Absolutely. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Am I sharing this with the FBI or, the state of Wisconsin? I don't think so.
Well, right, and I'm not trying, I don't suggest that to be alarmist or anything. It's just, it's a concern as a citizen of the city I have, and I think it's a concern that other citizens and constituents would have. So I appreciate that answer. I would think if we get it, we would want to integrate. What would be the point of not integrating with other communities around us? That doesn't make sense. Amy, is Flock owned? Is it a privately held single owner company, or is it owned by some type of venture capitalist group?
It is a private company.
Does it have shareholders other than the folks that own it, like private shareholders, or is it owned by venture capitalists and other entities?
It does have shareholders, yes.
I would like, frankly, more information on who the actual ownership interests are in Flock.
Sure.
Is it owned by nefarious entities like a Blackstone or someone, or is it just, a bunch of guys that really are into law enforcement? That's important to me.
It is all available. It is available online, but I'm happy to pull that for you.
Yeah, that would be great. That's it. I agree strongly with some of Chaz's points. I really like the idea. I'm on the fence right now because I think some of those questions need to be answered for me and for my constituents. I think if we put this in the next year budget, we'll have time. I mean, our budget cycle starts in 8 weeks. So we can do this, start putting it in the normal budget cycle, see how it fits into the budget, and have those discussions and give the community a chance to understand what we're doing because, it is kind of a sea change. I understand you guys are doing the ELPers and the license plate readers. That's been going on for a long time. That's pretty common. I think everyone kind of knows that you guys used to have to type the plates in. The thing, right? And I used to see the officer behind me and I'm like, oh, he's typing in my plate. Darn it. Am I up to speed? So that technology is yeah, I used to, yeah. Because I've always got it blacked out or something. So I'm not opposed to it conceptually. I think some of those questions need to be answered. I do think we should get some community input. And frankly, between now and when we start talking about this in budget cycle, which I think is the ideal time to do it, if we don't get a lot of input, then we have to make the best calls on what we decide is best here. So thank you, Amy, for coming in. We appreciate it. How was that Delta flight up here?
It was great.
Okay, great.
Alderman Ellis?
I think the conversations are outstanding, and I remember when you brought that up, I got very excited, and as a matter of fact, I called the mayor and I said, hey, can I get that in my neighborhood tomorrow? I think it's really good, but then Schulpepper brought up a really good, really important thing, and that was that we need to kind of take a step back a little bit and just look at the budget and make sure that it is really for us at this point in time financially. I mean, especially after what we just saw, hey, we can buy anything right now, can't we? So I really like to make a motion.
I still have some more questions. I'd prefer that you didn't. Some other aldermen have questions and comments.
I'd really like to make a motion.
Go ahead and make your motion.
I'd like to make the motion that we postpone the vote until after the budget sessions. And at that point in time, we can have more. We could have gotten all the information at which Rosick had wanted, and we can then make more of an educated decision instead of one that's emotional.
I'll second it just so we can have a discussion on what the intention of the motion is and where people are at on their thought process.
I think it's unfortunate to make a motion when you know you have other aldermen that have questions. So we do have a motion, we do have a second, so let's open it up for further discussion. Alderman Mulder?
I think there's a lot of good questions to get answered. I don't think there's urgency to do this now. I do think as we talk about engaging the community on this, the genie is out of the bottle, to your point. I mean, we're already doing this. It's actually less intrusive to know where they are and stationary versus having them going around the city. So, I mean, I don't know that we're giving up any additional liberties, so to speak, that we already haven't given up, just like every other aspect of our life. So, I mean, I think they're all good questions and we should address them. And timing for me isn't a big issue, but I think we can also create a scare in the community if we start talking about this being Big Brother when Big Brother is already there. So,
Alderman Altman-Cloth?
Couple quick questions. So you mentioned how we're already doing this with the squads. Does the squads keep that information though? Like the flock would keep it for 30 days?
Yes.
It does. How long does it keep it for?
45? 45 days, correct.
Okay. And then your comment about, if, like Schulpepper had mentioned about, if we were to have another stay-at-home order, and you said, you would just pull the plug on it. And while I trust that you would pull the plug on it, would future chiefs? Is there policy that we can put in place that would kind of protect those things even after you're gone? Overall, I like it, but I would like to see some of the policy around it before we approve it. I don't know if it's going in the wrong order. And then I don't think maybe Schulpepper had mentioned this, or maybe Rosick did. I think something like this in our community should get a chance to have a say in it. And I think before I would vote for anything in favor of this, I would like to see a public comment.
Sure. And we have no problem getting all that information, and like I said, they're more than willing to come out for a community session as well in the future. So.
And hopefully more than like 3 people show up.
I would say that I think there is like a little bit of nuance between the current systems we're using and the flock though, because you do want the flock because it does provide a lot more encompassing information and view on who's coming in and out of the community. And that's why it makes it effective as a crime-fighting tool, which I totally understand. But to kind of soften the blow to ourselves to say, hey, we're already doing this. There is, there's significant differences, I would say, in terms of how many vehicle license plates we are capturing. Because if we're gonna put 4, we're a pretty small place. We got choke points of where we can go in and out. We can get a really good grasp on who's coming in and out of the community and the movements they're making, which lends to your idea of why you can, make it a crime-fighting tool. I want to catch the criminals. I don't want to collect everybody else's
Correct.
information in the process of doing it.
Correct, exactly. I mean, I don't
So-
got time to sit and look at
Yeah.
who's coming in and out of the city. I'm gonna, we're looking for specific cars or,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah,
Correct.
so, that's it.
Mayor?
Great, any other comments? Alderman Rozak?
Yeah, really quick. Amy, I'm guessing this isn't the first council meeting you've gone to and not the first time you've heard a very similar debate. Would I be correct in saying that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Great question.
So nothing is unique about probably what we're asking and what we're doing and what our conceptualization is with regard to policy, usage. And I'm sure Elm Grove and Richfield and everyone else who's on that list and all around the country of the 2,000 jurisdictions have had some of the same concerns. So, and also have probably had good chiefs that were looking out to stop crime and give us tools to do that. So thank you for coming, Amy. I mean, I would encourage you, if we do a public hearing session on this, to maybe you come and help give a, similar presentation of what it is and how it, maybe bring one with you and let me drive by or something really fast and see what it does.
Alderman
Yes,
Alderman Mulder.
This is a bit off topic, but I don't think you were really proposing this, but I don't think if there would be a government ordinance or a government saying, stay at home, that we would want to give the chief of police the directive to unplug the tools we have to comply with the law that he's here to uphold. So I think it's just an interesting thing to say that the tool we would have, we would remove from use when it's laws we don't agree with.
Well, that, and hence a little bit of the apprehension,
Yeah, and
right?
who agrees with it, and which chief and which law? I mean, it's.
Correct.
That's not, I don't think, our job.
Once
as
the
a
tool's
council.
created though, right, once the tool's there and created, then the use of the tool can be used for anything that's deemed a crime in the future, including
can.
things that I personally don't agree with right now, or maybe you don't agree with, or whatever. So that's the questions I think we still need to answer.
So we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion?
Well, what's the specific implications of the motion as it currently stands?
The motion is to postpone it?
Yeah, so what's the idea until after the budget session, you're saying?
Well, yeah, by that time, my hope would be that we would have all the information, that all the questions answered, or at least the process thereof, so that when we do discuss this further, we have those answers already. So that's why I kind of just want to postpone it for a couple of weeks or so until we can get all that information.
So we can have a hearing by
Right,
that time?
so, right.
Chief?
So no problem getting that information. Just for my clarification, do you want a public hearing before then, or you want to discuss it and then a public hearing after that? Just so we have timing.
Because if you're
that's what
looking at the budget's, planning for the budget's coming up. So what you have in front of you is a budget amendment to act on this calendar year. What has been mentioned is to put it back into the 2024 budget because you want more time. So am I correct that your motion is to wait to put it into the 2024 budget? And so if that's the case, then we need to put some things in place before you start to discuss that so you can decide whether you want it for next year or not.
And then by then.
Is that correct?
That is correct, because and then by then, we will have the information, and it's going to be more logic than it will be
Got it.
emotional at this point.
Can I just add to kind
Sure.
of answer what Chief said? I think that we need more information than the public session.
Correct.
Like more information on like what would the policy look like, so that
We
if
need
that's
to be
asked during
educated
the public
first,
session.
before we go to the public, because the public's going to ask all those same questions that we're asking now.
So we've had some questions made of Flocks, which we can get those answers. Then what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you want to draft policy of how this would work. And then after that, if a public hearing is to let the public be aware of it and a presentation at that time, prior to making budget decisions on this item for 2024.
Yes.
And so putting it in place in 2023, based on what I'm hearing and the motion on the table, is not an option at this point.
Correct, and it's going to be considered during,
That's correct for me, or is everybody shaking their heads yes, no?
Yes.
and it'll be considered in full typical fashion for the '24 capital
Gotcha.
budget.
We just want to make
But-
sure we have the information for you at the appropriate time.
But that debate still needs to happen in terms of the capital budget itself and that discussion
Correct.
as
We're just
well.
trying to figure out, because
Okay.
capital budget's coming up really quick.
Understood.
That's why Chief's looking angry, how are we
Understood.
going to do this?
Yeah.
No, we'll get it done. I just want to clarify something is, we would write the policy from the guidance of you, because council can't write police policy. I have to write the policy, but it would be by the guidance. So just-
But so we can't enact though ordinances as to how we use the technology in our community?
Sure you can.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so that's, I think these are all things we just have to talk about. Maybe we don't want to do that at all, but it's just all things that, need to be
So I think we
discussed.
have a good, clear clarification on all fronts, and we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I think what we're really going to do here tonight, based on that motion, is that we should make a motion to deny the resolution that's here in place
Okay.
now, because that would stop that process, and then we would go through our budget process.
Okay, I'll withdraw my second.
You withdraw your second. Would you like to rephrase your motion, Alderman Ellis?
If he just withdraws his motion, then it dies because there's no.
Guys without.
Correct, and there can be no motion. Do you want to withdraw your motion, Alderman Ellis, or would you like to have it stay?
I will give you the information you are requesting.
Oh, good. Withdraw and the whole thing disappears. I didn't know this system.
I'll withdraw.
You'll withdraw? Is there any further motion on this item?
Okay.
With no motion I heard, this item dies, and I think the chief and staff have good direction. Thank you very much for the trip up here. We really appreciate it. And I think you hear from the council, they're very enthusiastic about this, and doing the due diligence and the vibrant discussion is good for the community.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to meet you all. I'm going to work on those answers and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. On to our next item. Whoops. Consider act on Resolution 23-R3130 for new 2023-24 fermented malt beverage license for Bar Stars Bartending Services LLC for the Oconomowoc Community Center. Is Craig still here?
I would,
I think he went home.
okay. Yeah, but I'll
You'll go
speak
for
to
it?
that quickly.
Okay.
This went to committee. Committee did recommend it. This is for a fermented malt beverage license for Bar Stars Bartending Services at the community center. The state requires the city to provide the fermented malt beverage license. They provide the alcohol or intoxicating liquor license because it is a public building, and again, it's our community center. Last year, council approved an agreement with Bar Stars, so they could be the vendor that will provide the alcohol and to the people who rent the community center. So that's already been approved last year. They would start July 1st of this year, and we just need to get their alcohol licenses in place for them to be able to do that.
Any further questions or comments? I'd like to entertain a motion.
Second.
No.
Gotta make the motion.
You're going to make the motion?
I make the motion.
Second?
Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder?
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper?
Aye.
Alderman Maroney?
Aye.
Alderman Douglas?
Aye.
Alderman Rozak?
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth?
Aye.
Alderman Ellis?
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Aye.
Next item, consider recommend resolution 23-R3135, granting renewal of the 2023-24 alcohol beverage licenses, all the licenses.
Thank you, Mayor.
Diane?
So before you is the renewal of all the current licensees here in the city of Oconomowoc. They meet all of our Chapter 12 licensing requirements as well as state statutes. It's for all types of the alcohol licenses, Class A, B, and C, and they are all listed within the resolution. And I recommend granting it, and so did Protection and Welfare.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
Rozak, so moved.
Second, Altman Cloth.
Any further comments, discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman-Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Under our next item, consider act on resolution 23-R3139 for the Wisconsin DNR Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, CMAR, for 2022 wastewater operations. Mr. Freeber.
This is Jeff, basically the report card for the wastewater treatment plant to inform you guys on how we did last year and what our results were from the water coming in to the water leaving, the biosolids that leave the plant, our financial statements, and also operator certification and staffing. As stated, we scored 4.0 or A on all the different categories.
So from the city standpoint, congratulations, just a fabulous job for you and your team.
Thank
you. Just want to thank you, because it's hard to do that well, that many years. So congratulations. Comments or questions for Mr. Freeber?
No, thanks, as always, Kevin. I've appreciated being the utility chairman the last couple of years and just, chatting with you periodically on this stuff. Good work. Thank you.
Again, I just want to
Alderman
make it known
Shellpepper?
it's all my team.
I had one just quick question. I saw in the report there was like a spill on some of the pre-treatment for the like lead and copper.
Yes.
How come that was something we never, was that something we had previously discussed, or is this another one we had
No,
talked?
no, that was
previously
a situation where we had a fitting go bad, I
Uh-huh.
believe, wasn't it, Scott? A fitting, so we had a fitting go bad. The tank sits in a low area with a drain to it that goes to the sanitary. So the product, the Aquamag that we're putting into the system, drained out and went full strength to the treatment plant. The water utility since then has put in a containment system to catch that so that that can't happen again.
Okay.
So, yeah, so.
Okay.
It was a one-time thing that, everything was approved when we built the station. It met all the codes at that time, so.
Okay.
This was just something fluke,
Thanks.
not flock, fluke.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? On to our next item. Consider act, what? Oh, consider act on ordinance 23-01046 to create section 9.32 of the City of Oconomowoc Municipal Code regarding third-party gift card procurement. This is our second reading. Chief Pfister.
I am happy to be back up here. So,
Chief?
we worked on this.
Chief?
Go ahead.
Could I just, so at your stations tonight, the chief's going to be talking about a revised ordinance. So you have 2 copies of the revised. The one on top that doesn't have an ordinance number listed on it is the red line version. And then the other copy that you have is a clean version of that. Just so that you're aware what you're talking about. Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
Thank you for recognizing me, calling out your name several times.
Well, and Chief, thanks for working with our friends from Roundy's and with Mark to try to see how we could do something better together here. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I just want to say it's been an outstanding experience. I've got to meet some great people in our community, and I think, we're going to have a great partnership going forward with Metro Market, with the Grocers Association, and so forth. And I appreciate Alderman Shellpepper for, bringing that comment up on the first time, to saying, reach out to them and get their opinions from all the stores, so I appreciate that. So going through discussions with them, the Grocers Association, Blackhawk, who does the credit cards, and so forth, we decided to make 2 changes. The first change is on page 2, under subsection 2. We will be adding with a value in excess of $100. And then also subsection 3, the self-checkout with a value in excess of $100. We decided that right now, we feel that's a good amount to be set at. And over the next 6 months, like you heard during the public comment, we're going to review data from them, from us, and look at, do we need to make changes to this? Do we adjust a dollar amount? How is it working? Those types of things, so that we can be in constant contact monthly on this and move forward that way.
Great. Alderman Altman-Cloth.
So the $100, is that, so if I'm being scammed and my scammer knows that we have this $100 ordinance, in place, could I just sit there and just, every transaction, just do $100 and that doesn't flag it? Opposed to just going in and doing 10,000,
You could, but that's why we're also working with them and others on further education and other security measures that they're also looking into. We're going to do some training with their staff and so forth, and I think, go forward on that. You could. But I think what we're looking at here is also having the interaction and them stepping forward. You see multiple cards, you're asking at that time.
but are they gonna see that at the self-checkout? I like
I
the
know.
idea because, if you're, we kind of talked about, if you, I think you had mentioned this, if I send one of my kids in to grab a gift card and, I give them my credit card, they don't have a driver's license, they can go through, with an actual cashier, buy the gift card, there's no problems. I do like that to kind of help, but the self-checkout, I think that just leaves a vulnerability there.
And it possibly can. And that's why I'm saying we would like to review this over the next 6 months, look at what the data is to get a better understanding.
But what
of-
data? Because,
of that.
you yourself said this is a very underreported crime. If I'm a senior and I get told to go through self-checkout and do this, and then I find out later that I was scammed, chances are I'm not reporting it. How many, in her opening statement today, she said, we don't have data of this happening. Well, of course we don't, because it's so underreported. Seniors don't like to admit when they're scammed. I just see a vulnerability at self-checkout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Mulder?
Welcome.
Alderman Altman-Cloth, I think that I appreciate that, and that's actually what you're talking about isn't what we're even protecting for here, because that is an elderly person going to buy a card and give
We're kind of
it.
doing two things, like if your
Right.
credit card is stolen out of your car, or the senior that gets the call that they have to go buy the gift card.
But we wouldn't solve that one. They would still buy the card. You might. Anyway, that's not my point. I think this is still imperfect, and I guess that's why we're looking at 6 months. It feels odd to me to pass an ordinance that we plan to change or think is not up to what we really want. So we're going to study it for 6 months and then put something in place. It seems more logical to me to do the study, pull the data, come back and say, okay, here's what we found, here's what we know, let's put it in place. I guess that's it feels backwards to me that to put something in place that we know is not probably the final product we want.
Alderman,
Chief, I can
Chief?
see you want to respond.
And I understand that, but in order for me to get that data, I have to have the ordinance so that they need to follow the ordinance so that we can see what that true data is, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're gonna change this ordinance, okay? But I may come back here and say to you guys, this doesn't work, okay? We're having a heck of a time, and this and that, and, let's get rid of it, okay? But I may come back here and say, hey, I think we're good at $100. I think we're good right where we are, where it's assisting us, it's keeping our community, our citizens safer, or there could be a dollar amount change. I don't know that I can get you the perfect ordinance without the data, and I can't get the data without something in place, is what I'm saying.
Question for you. We have one vendor and one wonderful employer in our community that's here, but we have nobody else.
Correct.
Have you recently, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, since this became more public, gotten negative feedback or concerns from the other grocery stores, from the other retail outlets?
The only other one that I had contact with was Sendex again, and I talked to them, and they were still okay. They had a couple of questions that I answered, but they were still okay with it. It has been basically the one, and then the Grocers Association.
And I respect, Matt, the concern, we'd like to try to get an ordinance that's right, but we're also, if we put something in place now, 5 years from now, it could be very, very different. And I think what Chief is saying is, hey, let's put something in place so that there's accountability. Because what I heard in the presentation was we were going to do an awareness campaign, 6-month review, monthly updates, and we're going to be able to monitor the data. That's what I heard was the agreement from our friends here in town. So I think it'd be nice to see us try to move something forward. And I think the wonderful thing about you guys as council, if it's not working, let's fix it. The thing that scares me the most about this, Chief, is that we don't know what we don't know. And there's so much under-reporting. So we could get a ton of data that completely upsets maybe the right thing to do, but unless we try something we don't know. So I see the pros and cons, and I can see the conflict. I also see a lot of turnover in a lot of these stores. So training and awareness scares the heck out of me because our job market is really tough right now. And so what you're trying to do, Chief, I applaud immensely, is you're trying to protect our residents. And I appreciate that on things that we don't have enough data on. Alderman Cloth.
I don't know if this is more a question for the representative from MetroMark, but on the self-checkout, if we do go forward with this and, 6 months from now, we're doing a review, can we get the data on like $100 gift cards that are purchased? And if, someone's buying multiple at one time?
Can you come up to the podium, please?
So the way that we would, with this ordinance in place, we don't have the ability to trigger at self-checkout. So what we would do is we would pull gift cards that are $100 or more in the open loop that Visa and MasterCard use anywhere, put those behind customer service, and have shoppers come up to customer service because the ordinance is requiring us to make sure that an ID, the name on the ID matches the name on the credit card, because that's the ask of the ordinance.
If I remember you correctly, when you discussed some of your data, your average value is about $45. Is that correct?
Yeah, the average value, I can tell you last year's numbers. The average value on a gift card is, let's see here. On the third-party gift cards for a year is $42.40. On the open loop, which is the ones that we're addressing today, is $104. And that's data from the Pabst Farm location over a 1-year period. That's the data.
Other questions or comments? Alderman Shellpepper.
Chief, what kind of, can you explain again what kind of data we expect to collect over the next 6 months? Can you just explain that to me again? And then what sort of changes we would envision making to the ordinance based on that collection?
Well, actually, I don't know if you want to come back
Or
up
maybe
here.
yeah.
We
So
talked
this
about
was-
this,
okay.
and they're gonna collect the data. We're gonna track our calls on this, because right now we get fraud. It comes
Okay.
in as a fraud. That could be a variety of different types of fraud and so forth. So we're gonna scour our data during this time as well, and change our codes so that we can better track our stuff as well. But I'll let you talk about what.
Yeah, so over the next 6 months, we have the opportunity to work with Blackhawk, who is a third-party gift card retailer for many retailers across the country. And they are going to work with us to help gather data from this ordinance, as we know came from Minnesota, understand the impact it's having in Minnesota, understand what's happening there, if this is potentially a great fix or if there's opportunities with it. So that's one of the pieces of data. We monitor, fraud is really important to us as an organization. We have a whole division or a whole team that looks at fraud prevention. So they are already capturing that data. And as I reported earlier, we don't have any reportable instances at this location. So the other thing we're going to do is really talk about public awareness, because the conversation we're having is about victim-assisted fraud, where the ordinance is addressing someone acquiring a credit card that is not in their name and not having an ID to match it. So
Well, not necessarily though, because there could be instances where, an elderly person is now being forced to have a personal interaction with a store clerk. I mean, obviously, we're not putting the law on that, on them to enforce, and that's But isn't that sort of the idea too, is that there is some more personal, because at the end of the day, this is my understanding, is most prevalent in the community because it's underreported, it's because it's a senior crime where seniors are being fraudulently, misled.
That's the assumption.
Right, and that's why, what, at the crux of what we're really trying to address, is that correct, Chief, still? Right, and so, I guess to me, there are portions of this ordinance that do encourage at least, that personal interaction to try to put some preventative measures in place. But I guess that's what I'm trying to understand in terms of, what other kind of changes could you envision making to this ordinance? Like, what other things are you guys going to propose in 6 months with the information you collect?
Yeah, so we're actually looking at Black Hawk to look
Right,
at the
I
industry
know,
as a whole.
but I just mean specifically, so you don't have any ideas or you're just, you're gonna collect and,
So we want to look at the data
Yeah.
and have the data support, what's going to work for retailers across, because at the end of the day, we'd like to have Chief have an ordinance that he's able to share, with neighboring municipalities, share best practice, where right now, we're looking at, one of the main things that we want to do is that public awareness, because if we're saying this is an underreported crime, but the challenge is people are going into stores, they're buying those gift cards, they're providing those numbers and PIN numbers over the phone, and we need to get ahead of that and say, hey, let's provide opportunities for the chief to come out and share that this is happening, how to recognize what it's happening, and how to do that. Because we've got signage in stores at all of our displays, including QR codes. So I understand we're talking about senior populations, but that provides the additional link to additional information. There's also handouts that are self-checkout that are available. So we just want to make sure that we're better able to proactively provide that information to the community.
so you have 2 stores in town? Is that correct?
We have, Pabst Farm is our, within the city
Oh, just the
proper.
distribution center.
And the
so-
distribution center within city proper.
Is there another, I thought there was another pick and save by the railroad
That's in the village.
That's in the village of Oconomowoc
Oh, yeah,
Lake.
that's not, it's not in the city.
Any idea of what percentage of gift card sales are coming from their single location? Chief, you have any idea percentage of gift card sales are coming from their single Roundy's location, city
No.
overall? I mean, God, that'd be
I mean,
interesting to know,
our,
'cause
our hope would be that you do the same thing in the village of Oconomowoc Lake as
Yeah,
well. And
right.
have the same activity, not just at your metro market, because that's really a way, because it's our whole community. So that would be, I think, a fair request of this council if they so desire. But I think at the end of the day, if we're able to work together, and it sounds like you have a good starting working relationship, I think this council would probably really appreciate a report after your 6-month review, where we come back and say, hey, if this does pass, then here's what we've learned.
So, and obviously, we're trying to work with the businesses in our community, and this ordinance. This was us working together and coming up with a dollar amount. The original one was no dollar, it didn't matter, okay? This is just us, obviously, discussing and saying $100, and it was kind of based off of their information of the 104, on those. I think what it does, though, like they said, putting it behind the counter causes that interaction for us as well. So I think we'll get better understanding of how it's working, if that makes sense.
Alderman Douglas?
So just want to confirm, all the gift cards are going to be behind the counter?
They would, based on the $100 limit, anything over $100 would be, my understanding would be behind the service counter?
Yes, it would apply to the Visa and MasterCard that are good at multiple places, valued at or above $100.
So it still wouldn't inhibit someone to grab 2 $50 gift cards and check out
$1.01.
on the self-checkout without being seen by anybody.
Right, most of our gift card use is for self-use, so we as an organization are very different from other retailers in the municipality because a lot of what we do is the promotion of gift cards. You get additional fuel points and things like that for utilizing gift cards, so we have a lot of low value. Mark gave a great example today, it's graduation season, so you'll see a lot of full shopping carts full of, cakes and party supplies and a gift card for the graduate to celebrate.
Alderman Rozak?
I think it sounds good. Chief, thanks for reaching out to them. Based on what our representative from Metro Market said, then my only change would be, and I'll make this motion, is that the change says with a value at or in excess of $100 for both sections, because she's saying the $100 gift cards are going to be behind the counter. So that would be my motion to make a change to both paragraph 2 and 3 of the policy.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further questions or comments? Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
I'll make a motion then to adopt the entire policy as amended.
So the second?
All in favor?
I would like to clarify, this would be the second reading. So I just want to make sure that you're giving it its second reading.
Yeah, this is the final reading.
Right.
Correct.
I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
we don't need to change anything with
to
that.
clarify that.
The first vote was on the amendment, the second
Right.
vote is on a final version with
Correct.
amendment.
So we have a motion and a second for the entire reading. Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Next up, Mr. Duffy, consider act on resolution 23-R3133, approving a redevelopment plan for the old Highlander redevelopment project area.
Good evening. As the mayor indicated, we'll talk about the redevelopment plan as we've talked about over the last several months. Several steps to this process. This one is primarily the redevelopment plan, really the framework necessary for us to create the blighted district, of which eventually we'll create a TIF project plan for. So there's 2 steps here. This is purely that general plan that you directed this Community Development Authority to draft a redevelopment plan at your April 18th meeting. This evening, the CDA held a public hearing as it relates to this redevelopment plan. 3 people spoke, 2 of which didn't live in the city, one that did. And they approved the redevelopment plan, or recommended it to you for consideration and moving forward. So I'll go through that plan for you. Just to give that basis of understanding of the legal overview and the definition of blight. When we are creating these districts, we need to use the statutory reference of blight anytime in which an area has a predominance of buildings, improvements, or by reason of dilapidation, deterioration, and obsolescence is detrimental to the public welfare. And secondly, areas which are predominantly open or because of obsolete platting, diversity of ownership, deterioration of structures, or improvements substantially impairs or arrests the sound growth of the community. That is the determination that ultimately needs to be made. Quickly, CDA, statutory authority, they are the entity that you've granted powers in order to create the redevelopment plan through your various resolutions. And under statute, that's why they're involved in this process. They have fulfilled all 3 of these elements of the statutory requirements. Your specific role in the process, you already adopted a resolution declaring the area blighted. You have directed the CDA to prepare a plan. We had the public hearing already. Tonight we're here, and we would be asking you to consider a resolution which requires 2/3 of the body to adopt the redevelopment plan in order to proceed. So with that, I will give you an overview of that document. All the property owners within this area were notified by letter of the public hearing and of these meetings, as well as the meetings that'll take place tomorrow. So it's approximately 65 acres that this area encompasses. This would be added or amended onto the Olympia Fields redevelopment plan, become incorporated into that as well. Obviously, you can notice the odd shapes of some of these. If you recall, back in February, you approved a series of CSMs as part of the old Highlander development. Those CSMs are still purely under lot and CSM numbers, under your specific direction. These will not be created until there's a successful closing by the developer before they're signed by the mayor and ultimately recorded. We do have some areas added as well farther to the west that we'll talk about as well. Part of that element as well is the blighting analysis. We went through this when you did your prior resolution. Statutorily, we're required to meet that test of blight. There's 88 total acres. The matrix in front of you is included in the report, identifies those blighting influences, which are specifically categorized in the state statute. 47 plus acres of that exhibit blighting influences, or 51.78% of that area, which meets the statutory requirement. Walk you through some of those parcels. Obviously, we have a non-functioning ski hill golf course complex. Golf course closed in 2013, so almost 10 years ago. Sports complex closed about 5 years ago, which was the indoor facility. So it shows its stagnation and underutilization as defined by the statute. Bill, as I said, the building has been empty and lack of upkeep and maintenance as part of the statute. As we've had continued conversations, this is also an interesting piece of property, and it's created that way. And you were made aware at that time that, as we know that there's a cell phone on top of here, not owned or controlled, that lease is not owned or controlled by the owners of the land. Controlled by a separate entity which encumbers the property. So we have added this area in the Briarwood subdivision. We will note none of these parcels within the Briarwood subdivision exhibit blighted conditions. They're purely in there, and this area is critical to provide the opportunity in the future, if this body in the future chooses it's appropriate, for the Oconomowoc Parkway connection at Silver Lake to occur. This area is critical because under the TIF law, you can only do improvements within a half a mile of the external boundaries of the district. The corner of parcel 18 gets us to the intersection of Oconomowoc Parkway and Silver Lake Street. Again, this is the ultimate district boundary, which will be added to the Olympia Fields area. What's proposed in that area, specifically in the redevelopment area, is multifamily residential development on the parcels adjacent to, I'll call it now the Sendix Plaza, I guess. As well as the other areas incorporated include the top of the ski hill and the former sports complex wrapping around to a parcel over by Robrook Drive. From a redevelopment perspective, this is what has been submitted to the city for the multifamily component by Mandel Corporation for the Norden Range development. Some of those plans are specifically coming through as we currently speak. Other elements that we talk about in the redevelopment plan are important infrastructure components. So this area will specifically be accessing the Pabst Road gateway entrance we created as part of the Olympia Fields development. So we envision to extend that infrastructure farther to the west as well as to the south in order to accommodate future development farther to the west. Other components that we always look at as it relates to considerations for orderly development is making road connections. So as the city has grown, many things are stubbed to certain areas. Even a question was made, why extend things? We are bringing roads up, enhancing them to public standards. If you recall at Olympia Fields, We reconstructed Regent Road, which was a private road, made it a public road to the north. It's the intent of and a recommendation of the redevelopment plan when this development comes forward to connect Regent Road, where we completed it for Olympia Fields, as well as connect Snyder Way, which currently stubs to the south, right at that point when this development component starts to move forward. All part of the orderly planning of the area. We look to use that gateway entrance that was opened up on Pabst Road, bring it down to the Oconomowoc Parkway, as well as build the bridge roadway structures in order to bring that primary infrastructure back into the Oconomowoc Parkway. Kenzie Lane is another road section that was always anticipated and planned for construction and extension. It was done so in 1999 when the subdivision was developed. Evidenced by the Plata surveys when those were developed with temporary turnaround easements, as well as one of the parcels actually notes a 6-foot asphalt path extending into the north of that property, identifying some point that would be developed in the future. Another thing we always take into consideration is how does it connect into the overall area of the community? Although we're only creating a redevelopment plan for those parcels that would ultimately become part of a TIF district, we do want to ensure that there's public access and connectivity for pedestrians and bikes throughout that corridor. So the developers provided a map with that, as well as we go through the process with the ultimate platting of this area, those subdivisions areas will show those additional sidewalks that'll be incorporated as part of those private residential developments. As indicated, one of the critical components in the conversations we've had is this key piece of property. As we're aware, there's some private discussions between the developer and an adjacent landowner at Paganica about this piece of property potentially becoming available as part of that process as an additional land holding for the city to extend the Oconomowoc Parkway. It's a logical component. It has always been the sticking point of this area. Interestingly, as many people may not be aware, the western parcel adjacent to that, the city has owned the end of Paganica Court for in excess of 20 years as part of the assemblage of the Oconomowoc Parkway. So we're continuing to move that through. Other improvements, proposed sanitary sewer to extend from the Pabst Road component to the Oconomowoc Parkway, as well as a 21-inch sanitary sewer upgrade, which would start the beginning of that upgrade that's needed further to the east to serve this development and things to the east. 12-inch water main to serve this area as well as things to the west, as well as the stormwater facilities necessary to support the development in this area when it moves forward. That's an overview of the overall redevelopment plan. These are the steps in the process we've taken to date. So again, April 18th, we declared the area blighted, directed staff and the CDA to prepare the very plan I just went through. They had the public hearing this evening. They recommended approval. Chairwoman Blaska has signed that resolution, and it's here this evening if you need to see it. But the clerk has that. Tonight, we're looking for you to approve the redevelopment plan. Follow-up steps. The property owners were also noticed about a TIF project plan amendment, public hearing and consideration tomorrow at the Plan Commission. And ultimately, the next step after that, the CDA would need to certify this redevelopment plan. So Alderman Douglas, I did make those two maps consistent right after you left my office. Page 7 and 14, those weren't consistent. They've been made consistent. Once they make that, certify that redevelopment plan, the city council would be acting on the 27th of June as well. That would put the next step in process, and the ultimate component of this, which is required, is the Joint Review Board having the ability to act on the TIF project plan. It's one reminder I make is the Joint Review Board is ultimately the final body that makes a decision of if we enter into a TIF project plan approval. So, because those are the taxing entities in which are allowing for the opportunity for foregoing taxes into the future in order to invest in this piece of property.
Questions for Mr. Duffy? Alderman Rozak.
Got a few. In our packets, 133, they've got the sidewalk, path, and trail plan. What's the difference between a path and a trail? Are they all paved?
The majority of them are paved. I believe the trail is a 10-foot trail along the Norden Range. The paths,
8 to 10.
8:15.
8 to 10, 8 to 10, I believe.
And paved?
Paved.
Okay, because so if anyone wants to see what that looks like, Lake Country Village next to my subdivision that's technically in Summit's got a lot of paths like this that wind through the subdivision. The other question I had is, they've got this sidewalk in blue. Are there going to be sidewalks through the rest of the development as well, like a normal subdivision, or is it going to be half and half?
good question. Alderman Douglas brought that up. So we actually looked at the plats that were just submitted last Thursday.
Oh,
And there are sidewalks in the subdivision plats of all the remaining single-family subdivision piece.
What about in some of those like kind of side-by-side kind of units? Because in the one picture you showed of the apartments or the side-by-sides, it looked like they had some sidewalks in front of them. Maybe
Right.
not in the apartments so much.
Right, the condos, we believe that those are private paths, as well as the area by the clubhouse on the west side of the hill.
What do you mean private?
There's some, I wish, how come they got the pointer to work on that?
What do you mean a private path? I thought these paths would all be public.
Well, we can dictate that in the developers agreement. Right now, they're showing in the plats that we're gonna look at staff tomorrow, because again, we just received them as a
Sure.
city.
Yeah.
The detail, a little bit outside of the redevelopment plan, but it's relevant of how we tie it together with the development agreement. In the area, so just west of the ski hill.
Yeah.
That's the condo area. If you look really closely, there's some dashed lines in there.
Okay.
Those are envisioned as private paths because that is a condominium development, and the building up on, in between those two stormwater ponds, that's actually their clubhouse.
I see.
So that'll be a private amenity, not necessarily a public amenity.
Right, the clubhouse is. Here's my concern.
I'll have to verify, we'll have to verify, are there sidewalks in front of the townhomes?
Yeah.
I believe I saw things that showed that there were sidewalks in front of the townhomes.
Yeah, and in the developers agreement, it's set up as a separate exhibit, but it hasn't all been fleshed out yet.
Oh, good, okay.
So it's going to be in the developers agreement and well-defined, including some elevation pictures.
Good.
Especially to protect the people on the north and the south that are now having homes when they're used to looking at an old golf course.
Right, no, that's good. I want to be clear what we're doing with the paths and the trails and how that's being handled. In the development in Lake Country Village, they built these very large paths through it and then donated the paths back to the village, which sounds really cool initially until you have to rebuild those paths, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'd like the paths as part of this deal to remain open to the public. I don't know how you would prevent people from using it, but I don't want to take over the care and maintenance of those paths into perpetuity either. I think that should be something that HOAs and those condo groups pay as part of, for
And
instance.
that's the plan.
Yeah, okay. 'Cause
And I
like the-
can't say, when some of this is talked about even previously, the Plan Commission required a traffic impact analysis, which we've received now. They actually also requested cross-sections of each of these pathway systems
Which we've
prior
got.
to it being
Okay.
approved, and that, some of that is in the information we just received.
Okay.
And then just recently, we're asking for bump outs and parking benches and stuff for people to be able to do it through that long area of the walk. So there's a
Okay.
lot more to it.
Well, that's good. The next few things will end up being in motion, and I won't make them now. But on page 118, I plan to, page 118 of our packet, page 8 of the redevelopment plan, there's a discussion of improved traffic. I plan to strike Mackenzie Lane. On page 125,
Say again what you were doing on 118?
on 118 at the top in section B, improved traffic,
Yeah.
I plan to strike Mackenzie Lane from there. My understanding is the traffic impact analysis did not indicate we needed to put Mackenzie Lane through. and that it was not necessary. It's also a request from my constituents who have significant concerns in Briarwood over that connection. Frankly, if it wasn't for the other road, the main road that we're building as part of the TIF to go through, it's 500 yards away from Mackenzie, I would say Mackenzie ought to go through. But they've got a connection through this, into this subdivision, right down the road by the condos. So I don't think it's necessary, and I'm going to make that amendment.
Like ever?
Yeah,
Like
that's
ever,
what I
because
was
we
gonna
had been
say.
talking about a determined amount of period for it to be closed.
Yeah, the other question that should be discussed at some point, folks, is that we need to talk to our public safety folks, the police and the fire, as it may not have to be a go-through. It could end up having a gate, like we have in other parts of the city, that can be an emergency gate if needed. So all of that still needs to be discussed, and the whole plan needs to be seen by the council before we strike things. I would love to strike that as well, because if I lived in that community, I wouldn't want that to go through. But I think we need more analysis before we jump the gun and make that type of decision, are my comments to council.
Well, here's my position on that page and another page. We have a traffic analysis, we haven't seen it yet, but my understanding is it says Mackenzie is not required to go through. We've got 4 or 5 different access to this subdivision already. I'm gonna make the motion, whether it fails or not. I understand that the rubber really meets the road in the developers agreement, but this does kind of set the table. So I think the language should be right, and we should direct it the proper way.
But I just would want to comment, I haven't even read the traffic study, I haven't even seen it.
Yeah.
It just came in. So you may be 100% accurate, but I think if you're going to make a decision on that as a council, you should see what it says.
Well, I
That
agree.
would be my only recommendation, because if we're not, I don't think we should vote on something where we don't have the facts.
Mr. Mayor.
Well,
Yeah,
but
Mr. Fry?
then, right, we're voting on something right now, though, that says Mackenzie will be connected pursuant to this redevelopment plan.
It actually, doesn't it say that that is one of the possible?
It's an option.
The plan
It
itself is
references,
just
it's a plan in general.
Just saying,
You're gonna
we might do
implement it.
this, we might do that. Doesn't say
Okay.
that at the end of the day.
Look, I didn't make my comment to have a debate with 5 different people on the floor of the council. My point is, I'm going to make the amendment at some point. I'm not making it now. I don't think it needs to be in there. It does say the plan seeks to improve traffic flow and then directs where it seeks to improve traffic flow. So my position is it should be changed. If I lose that vote, so be it. I know I have another kick at the can during the developers agreement, and I'll make the same motion then as well.
Yeah. But I think that's fair to state that, Alderman Rozak. I misunderstood. I thought you were going to make that amendment right now.
No, no.
And my main thing is, I think if we wanted to base it off the traffic study, and you may be 100%, I just haven't seen it. Have you read it,
I'll make it tonight.
Matt?
No.
Matt,
No, I
have you-
told him.
What's that? Oh, I'm
Have
sorry.
you, have you read it?
No, I'm aware
Okay.
of what's in it.
No,
Okay.
Mayor, I had a conversation with Alderman
Okay.
Rozak. He had reached out, and I have reviewed the study and indicated that the study doesn't make it a requirement that it has to connect. But I caution that I don't want to limit future council's ability, should something happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that they would want to connect.
And my goal is not to do that. My goal is to, on Mackenzie, at least for this purpose, at least put the direction in. There's one other thing I will do after we're done discussing, is on page 125. There's a discussion of site design. I do think there's a spot where we could add some language with regard to directing during the and maybe you guys tell me this is not the appropriate time to do this. But look, I think these things set the table for the next step. And what I'd like to add there is just some very limited language with regard to erecting berms, plantings, or other green shielding for the existing homes in the Whitman Park neighborhood and Briarwood. It's something we had discussed. It's not in this plan.
Yeah,
and I
that'll be,
think it should
that's in the developers
It
agreement.
will be?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, as a separate exhibit, because I would agree with you, that's extremely important.
Okay, it shouldn't hurt to put it in here then either.
We can add it, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
That's not a big deal.
Okay.
But I think and I appreciate the comments, because those are things that are very, very important to a lot of the community and a lot of the residents, so.
Yeah, that's right. I
Let's
agree.
get the traffic study off to all of the aldermen, so have a chance to read it. And then as we get into the developers agreement and those components, we can address it at that time. Any other comments or questions?
Well, on my comment, Mayor, if I may speak. I just wanted to note a couple of the pieces that I was looking for in particular was about the connection of the Oconomowoc Parkway. We had public comment earlier about the importance of making sure we connect infrastructure. As someone who regularly questions and scrutinizes the development that's happening in this community, I think it's an obligation that we have to make sure that if we are doing the development, that we're putting in the infrastructure necessary to support that development, to keep our current citizens safe. The reason that the Oconomowoc Parkway helps our current citizens is because there's going to continue to be residential growth around the Silver Lake Intermediate School. And the Oconomowoc Parkway is vital to connecting those residential areas to our commercial corridor on 67. It doesn't have anything to do with north-south connections as it must to do with east-west connections. So that was one piece, and then the other piece that I saw was the recreational opportunities for the Olympia, the former Olympia Resort, and making sure that we outlined in there that recreation, or the commercial recreational opportunities are gonna be part of that. So those were two key pieces of the plan. I just wanted to make sure the public was aware those are a part of it. And
No, thank you. Any other comments from council? And if there are other things that you see, let us know and we'll try to get the information. Alderman Douglas.
The only thing I'd like to point out that when I came in earlier that we noticed the east-west road within the single family that was originally a road is no longer a road that cuts through. It's now a path, just so you guys are aware.
On the middle?
Down the middle. So on the far left.
yeah,
Sure it's a path or is it a trail?
Paved.
Boulevard path, essentially?
I don't know,
How do you know that?
because I came in and saw the plat map.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So they removed that road that was originally supposed to be a road.
interesting. We're gonna have to see an elevation on that too and see what that looks like. 'Cause that's a change too.
Alderman Maroney?
I would just have to agree with Shell Pepper as far as going east to west. More so, that connection, is vital. The parkway being completed east-west with the development at Silver Lake Middle School along with Arrowwood subdivision. You can see plain as day, like we're trying to create this east-west. So I do agree with Shell Pepper there.
Okay, without any further discussion, call roll, please, or I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the redevelopment plan for Old Highlander.
Oh, I was gonna make some,
Oh, yeah, well, sorry, I'll withdraw my motion. You wanted to,
yeah, thanks.
Make
I appreciate that courtesy, Alderman Shell Pepper. And whether they pass or not, it is what it is. I know that we have another kick of the can at the development agreement, but on page 118, section B, I make a motion to strike Mackenzie Lane.
A second.
Any further discussions or comments? Call roll, please.
I didn't hear who made the second, I apologize.
Alderman Douglas.
Oh, thank you. I just couldn't hear you. Already calling the roll. Alderman Mulder.
Nay.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
nay.
Alderman Maroney.
Nay.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Nay.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Nay.
Okay, so it failed.
On page 125, I had one other additional change it would be a new paragraph before section 3.3.4. The redevelopment plan also envisions erecting berms, plantings, or other green shielding between the new development and existing subdivisions to include Briarwood and, I think it's Whitman, I think they call it Whitman Park, but
Second.
Whitman
And
Hills.
may I add to that, Alderman Rozak?
Yeah.
Add to that, that is outlined in an exhibit in the developers agreement. That will tie the two together.
yeah, as outlined in a forthcoming exhibit.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call roll.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
The last motion I would make then is if Chris is right, and the plat is different than Exhibit A, which is the vision.
Well, Exhibit A is correct. I'm just saying from
Oh, we don't-
last month's
I
stuff
see.
that was presented.
So
It's
Exhibit A,
different.
that is now a path, not a road in the
Right,
middle?
that's
Oh,
changed.
okay,
That's different.
okay.
For sure, from what we were presented with.
Then I'm fine with that.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended redevelopment agreement.
Agreement? Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Duffy. On to our next item. Consider act on the Lac La Belle Yacht Club's use of Lac La Belle for sailing events, Mr. Hepner. And to kind of start off, first, thank you so much for staying so late. You guys have been sitting here since 7:30, and I apologize it's taken this long. But I also think that from your engagement, as well as what Craig is going to share with the council, there are a lot of opportunities for us to improve some of our agreements and ordinances in the future, and this is one example. Mr. Hepner.
Thank you very much. So our friends at the La Belle Yacht Club have used Lac La Belle twice per season for sailing regattas for many, many, many years, 145 according to their website. And I do think they think this meeting might have lasted at least half of that. All right, so once, I had to try. But once every few years, they have an opportunity to host a much larger regatta. And that's what I've described in the memo. It's the Wisconsin Yachting Association Sea Scow Championship Regatta, which is the first weekend of August. They'll have approximately 50 to 70 sailing boats. So the reason we're here tonight is our city has an ordinance. I do need to read it because it's important. It says, no person shall direct, conduct, or participate in any boat race, regatta, water ski meet, or other water sporting event or exhibition which is sponsored or operated as a public presentation unless such event has been authorized by the Common Council and a permit issued therefore by the City of Economowoc Parks and Recreation Department. So that's why we're here. I think it's a pretty simple thing. I think we all support this, but in consistency and very similar process we used for the Silver Circle sports events for the triathlon, you granted them permission to have their swimming portion of their event on Lac La Belle or in Lac La Belle. So similarly, we're looking for your approval tonight to approve, and I will say this as a blanket statement for all future regattas, not so they would have to come back every year, to approve that. Now, as the mayor alluded to, Stan and I have had this discussion with other city staff. We think this ordinance is a little unclear and maybe really antiquated. So there could be revisions potentially coming down the pike, but that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. So in short, our staff and the city staff recommends approval of the use of Lac La Belle for all future La Belle Yacht Club regattas. The annual event permit with the city would continue to be followed as they currently do with our staff and our city for each regatta, and the yacht club would work with the city staff to schedule all the regattas. Language is included always with this event permit or agreement, as like any other special events, that the city has the option to revoke future regattas if all requirements are not met. So we think it's fairly simple. I think it's a very positive thing, and I would welcome if you want to invite the folks that have stayed here till 10 o'clock to just kind of give a positive, like what is it bringing to the city and that, since we're already here. But that's up to you, Mayor. But I do want to say that we do support this as a city staff. I think a lot of us have been involved in this. I think it's great for the city, but I think it's a formality that the city does need to take. So happy to answer any questions.
And what we do with this ordinance, guys, I mean, I would like to direct the staff to really look at this ordinance because it's very unclear. There's a big difference between paid groups that make and profit from doing different types of events, to clubs, to different entities, to definitions of what's a regatta. Is it a night of sailing? Is it a number of boats? There are a lot of different ways that it can be done. So I think what's important is what we've learned is this is one of those ordinances that definitely needs to be improved. I really appreciate that the Yacht Club has come to say, hey, we want to have this event. And I think there's a lot more to this than what you see in front of you. And I think it's up to us to say, hey, we really enjoy you bringing this into the community. It's a great event, and it's something that helps with our economic development. It's great for the city, it's great for the town, it's great for the village. And I strongly suggest that you support this event this time, but I think what's more important is that we don't start signing all sorts of documents and doing all sorts of things until we really reassess this with our city staff, and we sit down with the folks from the Yacht Club to say what it pertains truly to sailing and what doesn't, because there are a lot of inconsistencies that need to be addressed. And it's nobody's done anything wrong, it just is, I sailed on LaBelle for many, many years, and this was never even a discussion. And we had multiple regattas. And what we want to do is be a really good community-minded city and not make people go through hoops and backflips and put in there some details that could limit their ability to do things that they've done for 100+ years. So I would strongly recommend that we move forward and recommend moving forward with this for this regatta. It's a WIE Championships Sea Scout Regatta, which is a huge honor to have. That comes to LaBelle once every 4 years. So that is my recommendation to the council, is to move this forward. But it's, again, one of those ordinances, as I mentioned, we need to go back and update it for really the different usages, because we have ski shows, we have different events, triathlons, all sorts of things that affect. And we want to make sure that it's written legally and properly and incredibly clear, so there's no ambiguity for any mayor, any council moving forward. So I invite the folks from LaBelle to come up if you'd like. I don't feel that's necessary, but if you'd like to make a statement, you're welcome to.
Hi, I'm Katie Quirk-Delahunt, and I'm with the Yacht Club. And I want to bring to your attention that there's been a big miscommunication with the city and the council. We came to ask for permission to put a pier on the Veterans Park area for this regatta. We were not seeking a permit of any sort. We never have ever in the history of any regatta here ever sought a permit, filled out a permit forms, you know, anything that this ordinance requires. We don't set up buoys, mark off our areas. The regatta takes place on the other side of the lake, town of Oconomowoc. We would like to launch our boats for that and park trailers there. That's the extent of what we need for this event. We did communicate that we withdrew the need for the temporary piers. We do not need that. It seems to still have gotten on your agenda, and I'm sorry about that. But I don't believe we are looking for the Common Council's approval. We do not want to set any precedent that the council would have any authority to schedule our regattas or revoke the ability for us to have a regatta. Again, this has never been done. Why now, after so many years, I do not understand. And it just became a miscommunication. So, you know, your notes here say that Diane Gallo came in to request approval to use Lac La Belle. I mean, the Yacht Club has never asked for approval to use the lake for our races or regattas. So we believe this ordinance doesn't apply to our organization's events.
Attorney Riffle?
This ordinance doesn't apply to anything that's beyond the ordinary high water mark. However, they're asking for a lot more than what's on the ordinary high water mark. They're asking to use our grounds. They're asking to park vehicles. They're asking to use bathrooms. The way that staff in the past has treated this ordinance is that if you want the opportunity to use city property for purposes of an event, then you shall apply for and receive a permit. And what staff is simply requesting of this council is you authorize them to grant the permit. They always sign the agreement that relates to using our grounds, and that is also covered by ordinances that are in your parks chapter. So we're going to completely revamp this ordinance because it doesn't make any sense. You can't control, if they wanted to do everything out of town of Oconomowoc or whatever, they don't need to see us. They have every right to use that lake any way they want to use it, so long as they meet all of the requirements of the ordinances as to operation of boats on the lake, which are regulated under ordinances that are shared by Lac La Belle, Town of Oconomowoc, and City of Oconomowoc. So I agree with you 100%, use the lake. If you want to use our property for any purpose, then please just go along with the permitting process. You're not going to have a problem.
Are you stating that we have in the past ever had common council, applied for a permit?
Not at all.
We have never.
It doesn't matter what happened in the past, we're talking about right now.
Well, I think it does.
doesn't.
Legislatively, if you look at language, it's usually the intent of the drafter, what they intend. And I would say that since it's never, ever, ever in 148 years or whatever, been enforced or asked of the yacht club, that the intent was never to have the yacht club come to the common council to see if we can use the lake. We have always, yes,
You have
paid
every
a
right to use the
fee
lake,
to
ma'am.
launch, and that's what we're happy to do. We always pay the launching fee. We have rented the community center. That's a rental. I don't think anybody else using the community center has to get a permit to do that. And so, again, you know, if you want to look at the language of the ordinance, if you want to focus on the word that is critical, is that you are, have a statement in there, or it only applies to public events, and this isn't a public event. Unlike the triathlon that's going to happen, that is open to the public. Anybody can join in and run in the event. They can mark off the area.
Only registered athletes are
Sure.
allowed in that event.
Correct, yes. Yeah, but anybody in the public can do that. For any of the sailing events, you have to have pre-registered, anybody can, you know, at the beginning of the season, register their boat to be in the yacht club and sail on Saturdays and Sundays and Wednesdays. Those are all races and regattas. Do you want us to get permits for all of those events all summer long? Either enforce the ordinance like it's written or don't enforce it. And it hasn't ever been enforced. So, you know, these are not public events. When you have a regatta with all the other lakes coming, those people have to belong to a team, right? A club. Just like you go to a high school event, nobody can just, like if they like to shoot the shot put, they can't just show up and shoot the shot put. You got to be on a team. So
Alderman
this is a
Rozak?
regatta, you got to be on the team. Yeah.
Well, frankly, I
Yeah.
disagree with you. It is a public event. My understanding from the memo we got is that you're going to be parking trailers and whatnot on
How is it
City
a
Beach.
public event? I'm sorry, if you could
Well,
address
because
that.
it's a public event with clubs that are not general public. I mean, it's people, you just said coming from other yacht clubs. Is it people from other yacht clubs coming to the lake? Parking their trailers at City Beach and on the grass? Then it's a public event. You can define it any way you want. If we're required to issue a permit for that usage, I'm going to go with our city attorney and suggest that we issue the permit potentially. But I guess I'm curious what we're actually voting on tonight. Are we issuing a permit? Are we not issuing a permit? What are we doing?
You're being asked to agree with the recommendation of your Park and Rec Department to allow them to issue a permit for purposes of the two events and all events in the future for this yacht club, so long as they meet all of the requirements of an agreement that meets the conditions that the Parks Department requires of anyone using our parks.
Are they using the land at City Beach to park trailers?
Yes.
And so, yeah, then they need to get a permit. And I'm not in favor of
Do
issuing
other
a.
people who use that
Yes.
beach have to get a permit?
If it's for a major event that brings in additional people outside of the normal public that uses it. If I go there with my kids to go to City Beach and there's trailers all parked on the grass and I can't use it, it's a public event. I'm not a member of your yacht club. So
So then we could have each of the people sailing show up. I think the only reason we, you know, ask for. Yeah, yeah. no. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be contentious, but it
Oh, I
seems like,
know.
it
No,
seems like
we're
you got
trying
very
to
contentious right away.
where this is
It doesn't matter where it comes from, and it's not the intent of the law, it's what the letter of the law is. If the permit's required, the permit's required. What the city staff has said is we should give you a permit basically into perpetuity as long as you don't violate the terms of the permit to park there and use up the parking lot.
If you read the ordinance, it's things that we could never comply with.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the ordinance, I have a question. Why would we give them a permit forever when Mr. Osborne from Silver Circle has had to come back here twice so far? And the mayor never sat there and recommended that, you know, gave a big speech about what a wonderful small business owner he is in the city and give him a permit for the try for as long as the try goes on and as long as there's no trouble. Just a curious, I mean,
Well, actually, you're giving the staff the authority to
issue the permit.
To issue the permit, yeah.
well, then give this,
But really what happens is
if
you
we're
want
gonna
to
do
try
for one,
to,
then we do for all. We can't pick and choose who our favorites are.
so I just, Alderman Clough, I am not picking favorites. And so this is
I agree
is
that the
not that way at
ordinance
all.
needs to be
For me, it's, this thing has to be rewritten. Our attorney's already stated that. So we found an ordinance that needs to be improved. Right now, you have a regatta coming at a point in time, and the council has to decide, do they need a permit for that regatta, the large regatta, in August? And so they're being treated just like everybody else. It's just, it's different than how they were treated historically. And that's why there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of miscommunication. This has gone around in multiple circles between staff, the yacht club, multiple members. So it's something, let's just try to fix it because I think it's good for everybody. And the council needs to decide how to improve that ordinance, not just looking at sailing, but looking at all of the different entities that come. So do not ever feel that I have any plan that this should go into perpetuity for sailing because I like sailing. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with everybody's got to play the same game. Everybody has to play by the same rules, and that's why this has come forth. Alderman Spiegelberg.
So Badgerland skiers on Fowler, they come every year to Parks and Rec and try to get the approval, how many shows they can do, how many practices they can have. And when they do their shows, they take up a lot of trailer space. Do they apply for a permit through our city? How does that work?
Craig?
Okay.
Correct. So they go through the Park and Recreation Board.
Right.
And they get a permit from the city, just like any special event. So think of downtown Village Green Beer Garden.
Right.
Think of all the runs and walks. All that comes through our department. This is no different.
Okay.
They have to get a permit from our department, which we use. We send out to all the other departments to make sure we're good to go.
Okay, and do they get a permit for each date that they have? Okay.
Correct. So they, like for the Badgerland, they have 7 dates, and they're specific for the year, and each year they come back for it.
Okay.
So all these groups basically renew. Similarly, they have come through our department for every event for a permit. You can call it agreement, a permit, whatever word you want to use, they do that. So they have been doing that. The only thing that's different is because it's been on the water and we have an ordinance for it, and they have a large event, it made sense to be consistent with Silver Circle. So that's the only difference. But the rest of it is consistent to what we've been doing for many, many years.
But the key thing is that there need to be improvement in the ordinance to take into consideration. When you look at a regatta and a big event that's affecting the city, it's 1 or 2 a year. But they have sailboat races multiple times a week, which also can be termed a regatta, but it's basically sailboat races. And they can have anywhere from 10 to 20 boats, and they're typically all on LaBelle. So the thing that's important is that whatever comes out of this, let's just improve it so we can move forward. I can sense from the LaBelle Yacht Club that they're incredibly upset, and we just have to figure out a better way to communicate, because we should have never, ever gotten to this point.
Do you mind? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, my opinion is that it seems like permitting should occur, it should have always occurred, and that in perpetuity doesn't make sense because we're going to redo the ordinance, so we don't even know what we're granting rights to. So my recommendation is that we instruct Park and Rec to provide permits for this year, and we revisit this after the ordinance has been rewritten.
I agree.
I don't know how we do anything else.
Sounded like a motion to me.
Sound like a motion to me.
That would be, I would move that we would.
Second.
And if there are other discussions.
We have some more discussion, Alderman Douglas.
All right, I have a couple of questions. First, how do we figure out the launch fee of $300 or per boat launch fee, whatever is lower? Is that regarding a specific ordinance for that permit?
That is historic, way before our staff's time, so I don't know why they chose that. I'd recommend charging them for each launch. But I think they've tried to work out a deal and try and make it easier financially. I can't really answer how it became that.
So my next question, does it cost them any money to apply for a permit?
No, permits are free.
Permits are free.
And then my third question is, if I just go to the launch and I pay, am I allowed to park on the grass? Or is that
No.
only because of this
It's
permit?
something special for this permit.
So if they want to put 50 sailboats on the water, they can launch and pay the fee for every sailboat, pull it out, park it somewhere else, and they can have their race. But they cannot use our land to park their boat unless they do a permit.
Correct.
So at that point, if they don't want to apply for a permit, we can just say, put your trailer and vehicle somewhere else.
Alderman Rozak?
Yeah, I think, this whole discussion got off track when we first started out talking about an ordinance that was flawed for some reason, because it's not even agendized, and I agree that maybe we should address it, but really we're addressing whether we give them the permit for this event, because now it's come to our attention. I sense some dissatisfaction with having to seek a permit. I say to that, too bad. If you're required to get the permit, anyone, if I go and want my family to go to a birthday party at Fowler and rent the thing, I gotta go rent the thing and get the permit. So what I'm curious from Craig is, how much land, do they take up all the grass? Because I don't recall them.
Specific on the grass area. So the grass in question is actually the old community center
Okay,
space.
okay.
And the gravel area, so really unused by anyone
Not the
else.
area where the swimmers and stuff
No,
go. Okay.
Technically, one of their events for the kids, they do use that, but it's not a big deal because it's during, so each event is a little different. But the grass we're talking about really is the space that's the old community center space.
And I don't know, my other point is, I don't know why we would give any exceptions on our boat launch fee. We just redid our boat launch fees.
I agree.
This last year, and I get that their groups have had special accommodations in the past, and maybe we should, take that into consideration, but I don't think we should pick favorites. Just because it's a cool event doesn't mean they shouldn't have to pay the same fee as me having to launch my boat on that same Saturday if I want to launch my boat. So I'm sorry that it costs them $5 instead of $3 per boat. I really don't care. I think they should pay whatever is in our ordinance that everyone else has to pay to launch a boat, regardless of whether it's regatta or it's a fishing boat. So I'm all in favor of giving them, I agree with Mulder too. It should be just the permits for this year, give it to them, and then we can rewrite the ordinance, so.
Yeah, so the cost is $8 per boat, so 400 to whatever the next number is, somewhere in that range. So a little more than the 300, but.
Did they actually apply for a permit then? Oh, then there's nothing for us to vote on tonight.
They have applied, again, you can use whatever, well, first off, I'll say this, I tried to make this very simple for everyone, but people did not want to follow that direction, so that's enough said on that.
Do you mind if I introduce myself to the committee? Is that
Hi,
okay?
sure.
I don't want to talk out of turn. My voice, I'm covering laryngitis and I'm not sick, even with all the coughing you're hearing, it's lung stuff. But I'm Heather Shanks. I'm the Commodore of LaBelle Yacht Club, and it is very nice to meet you all. No one is fuming here. If the issue is just using that lot, then we will probably be withdrawing it, only because, again, the language for public, I get what you're saying with that particular piece, I do. That typically implies to me and to our board, as we've thought of this, is, you're using police resources or you're shutting down some kind of area so that no one else can use it, which is not what we're doing at all. We have rented the space at the community center. That's what, it has always been our understanding that that's what this is. Usually a permit process would imply applying for a permit. We've never done that. We've only signed an agreement with the community center to rent their space. And if that isn't how you're understanding it, then I completely understand that, and going forward, obviously, you all have the ability to do what you want with that. If we need to withdraw our rental of that space for this event, we can do that if it's not going to set a precedent. The thing we're concerned about is how broad this is and how much, I mean, maybe just more discussions need to be had, and we're fine with that. I mean, I'm happy to communicate with anybody here if you have questions about the yacht club or, you know, how we do things or anything, because I know sometimes people hear yacht club and they think ascots and, you know, people who somehow think they deserve special treatment, and in this case, we certainly do not. If you're wanting us to pay full launch fees, we're happy to do that as well. So I guess you kind of have to tell me maybe what you're looking to do, but if that's going to be the criteria for the public event, then we will probably withdraw our rental of that area for this, only because we're at a kind of at an impasse here until you see what you do with some of these
So
codes.
if I'm hearing
Does
you
that make sense?
correctly, the council, or what I'm understanding is the council says, hey, give them the permit for this year. Let's sit down at the table, let's work together, find out some good common solutions. What you're saying is that you're not willing to sign a permit because you think it's going to set precedent.
Right. That's what we're concerned.
Is that, and so it's really,
And the
you've,
requirements.
And we didn't request.
That we cannot possibly comply with. So to get a permit, and then this language saying, if we don't comply, then you're gonna revoke the ability to have our regatta, well.
And that's what the
we can
language
tell you
says,
right
which
now,
is very, very
We're not
broad.
gonna be able to have an area marked off, we're not gonna be, you know, I mean.
Well, this is the same, but ma'am, this is the same language we give for all permitted events, regardless of the nature of the event, okay? So if the Silver Group or whatever they are, and the 5K group or whoever uses space, takes off part of the parking lot, uses whatever, they have to all comply with the same rules. We're not treating you any differently than anyone
I
else.
understand that. I'm not sure what you mean by revoking
We're not
something. If it
regulating
doesn't follow
anything on the,
requirements, I'm
ma'am,
not sure what those would be.
We're not regulating anything on the lake at all. If you were to launch from Lac La Belle, or you were
Right,
to
and
launch
well, and
from,
that's what I'm saying. I mean, we're still going to launch because any
And that's fine.
boats can launch from the launch.
so
But if we
maybe
need
I
to
can make it as simple
withdraw-
as I can possibly make it. If you don't want anything from the city other than launching boats, just like any other person, and finding a place to park that isn't different than any other person, you're good to go. You don't need a
Well,
permit.
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
That we can certainly do
Good, we're
that if
done.
it will make this easier.
Good, we're done.
Does that,
Language in the agreement does
There will be no,
say that the city has the
I'm sorry?
option to revoke regattas.
there will not be any agreement.
I mean,
We're not gonna do,
We just
I,
wanna-
I'm not voting or agreeing to any agreement with this group at this point. You guys can launch, like our city attorney said, like any other person who wants to launch a boat, have your
and that's
sailing event.
fine.
Yeah.
If that's what needs to happen for this,
It
because
doesn't
again,
need to
this all
happen. We're
came.
saying we'd be willing to give you the permit and allow you to use the space, but that you guys don't want to comply with any of the same rules that anyone else has to, so.
No, I'm sorry. I would like to speak to that for a moment.
I
When
think
when
I
this started,
personally- I'd like to call the
we
question.
didn't bring this.
Just call the question.
There's
This is
no
completely
motion.
fruitless.
there's no
Right.
motion.
No motion.
Then,
There's no action to be taken.
So I'd
There's
like,
no-
is there any motion that anyone would like to make? No, no motion is made. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, if you have questions, please do get ahead.
We've already done the mayoral appointment. Any staff reports? No staff reports. Any comments from Alderman? Alderman Mulder?
You know, I'm going to. It's been bugging me since the beginning. I probably make $10 an hour on this job. Everybody that sits up here is on 3 committees. In my 3 years, there has maybe been 5 times that a council member has not been at this, and maybe that many times that they haven't been at a committee meeting or had a very good reason for not being there. You guys all work your butts off for essentially no pay. Our staff does a fabulous job. And for people to sit who contribute nothing to the city and take pot shots at us is ridiculous. So I commend all of you for all your work. So thank you.
I would like to say something too. I concur, absolutely. I think all of us
have gone ahead and been here, especially after hours, and we're not even done yet. And for individuals to come up and take those pop shots, how dare you? Period. How dare you?
And I'll just join in. The two screens, we as aldermen do get the laptops or the options to have them. But we had a meeting here earlier with our CDA committee. They don't get the laptops. They rely on the screens. So, and Matt, I cannot thank you more for what you said about, $10 an hour. And that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, what we make an hour. And I can say that I did miss one meeting this year, and it was a library board meeting. There was nothing pressing on the agenda, and I chose to miss it to attend my son's conference track meet, in which Oconomowoc did win conference.
I apologize, because I did miss a meeting when I had
You don't have to
cancer
apologize.
surgery. So, but I was there the next
No, you
meeting.
don't
so,
apologize. Do not apologize for that.
And who lost their laptop or their tablet for 6 months?
Yeah.
Just curious, it was not me.
I still have it.
Oh, okay, just checking.
I can mention a past alderman that I think that happened to, but I won't say his name publicly.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So any other alderman comments? And
Well,
Matt, thank you.
speaking of track, the
Yes.
boys 4x200 this last weekend at state did take third in the state and broke the school record. And there may be a really good-looking 16-year-old on there that I'm related to.
Fantastic. Okay. Any other comments from aldermen? I just have a comment. Matt, thank you for bringing that up, because there's a point in time when you can just take so much beating.
Thank you.
And I applaud you for bringing that up. And with the person here in the audience to be able to hear that, hopefully we can go in a positive direction from this point forward. I did ask Mark to read a letter to give you an update on HR Bill 1668. I would read it, but I didn't bring my glasses. So Mark, could you read that for me, please?
Sure, and actually, it was distributed to all the aldermen. It was at your station. It's from Dirk and Terry Debick. You may recall that they were here, and we'd passed that resolution and regarding the HR 1668, named after their daughter. But, they had gone out to Washington right after that meeting and wanted to provide us an update. They were able to pay personal calls to 9 representatives and 3 senators, plus 1 more congressman's chief of staff and another transportation staff member. So they had a total of 14 meetings. At each of the meetings, our letter and resolution from May 16th were part of the leave behind packet, which they thought that was very good. They're going to be heading back to DC next week to hold meetings with the original sponsors of the bill, who unfortunately they had not yet even met. But 10 more congressmen have been added as sponsors since mid-May. And they've named a couple of them that there's now 33 sponsors, including 3 of our 8 representatives from Wisconsin. Many organizations have come out in strong support of the bill, including League of American Bicyclists, Wisconsin Bike Fed, People for Bikes, Sierra Club, National League of Cities, Truck Safety Coalition, and Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. We expect the Senate version to be introduced soon by Senator Cardin and Van Hollen. We've asked Senators Johnson and Baldwin to co-sponsor out of the gate. Their staff members said that they think the bill looks fine, so we're expecting them to do so. They've had discussions with the members of the House and Senate considering the best way to see the bill passed sooner than later without floor debate. The sooner it's passed, the sooner municipalities like Oconomowoc will have access to federal funds for safety-related projects, and the sooner that we can start saving lives. So that's from Dirk and Terry Debick. So, it was a great thing that we were able to do here and get this thing started. So, and obviously with their emotional ties to this, they will not give up until it's done. So, say thank you to them.
Final comment is we do have a committee of the whole meeting after this. We have a couple options. We can do it as planned or not. That would be up to you as council members. It is scheduled. If we do it, we should take a 5-minute break and jump right into it. We have our staff that stayed here for a really long time and can try to have closure on that. That might be the best to continue as planned and what's been publicly noticed.
10-minute break.
10-minute break?
Will we get paid overtime?
We'll double what you're making now.
Let's start at about 11:45.
I need a motion for
Motion to
adjournment.
adjourn.
Motion
Rozak?
to adjourn.
Thank you.
All in favor?
I expect everybody to still be in here.
whole meeting for Tuesday, June 6th, 2023. Has appropriate meeting notification been made?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
If you would call roll, please.
Yes. Alderman Mulder?
Here.
Alderman Shellpepper? Alderman Maroney?
Here.
Alderman Douglas?
Here.
Alderman Rozak?
Here.
Alderman Altman-Cloth?
Here.
Alderman Ellis?
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg?
Here.
On to committee business, 2024 budget priority discussions. Mr. Fry.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So part of this process was that, you know, the department heads were going to provide their three top budget priorities so that the council would have some idea what direction the departments were looking to go. And then I believe the original intent, and Aldermans Mulder or Rozak, if I'm wrong, correct me, was that, you know, for the alderman portion, we were looking for any different or other thoughts that you may have as to things we should be looking at in the budget. So because of the time, and we can stay here as long as you guys want to talk about things, but I would make the suggestion that, you know, for the departments that we have left, if you have ideas other than what they're presenting, to let us know that, so that way we could start looking at potentially incorporating that. I know we will talk streets and some of the costs and how to get caught up on some of that. I think that's, you know, a conversation to have, because that's a significant item coming up. But I don't know any other comments that you might have for the departments, but that would just be my suggestion, is that, you know, maybe if we could just streamline it to, you know, different ideas, or if you need a little bit of more information on a couple of the items or something like that. So that's just my suggestion.
Where did we leave off? What department?
We're gonna be starting with police.
Please.
Okay, so we got police, public works, utility, wastewater, WLFD.
Yep.
I'd like some traffic cams.
I don't have any, are you?
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. It's been a long night.
Looking forward at the SROs, you know, for the schools. Hopefully, I know that's not a 24 thing, but just, I hope that's on the radar, discussion, cost sharing, increasing the number of SROs if possible. We've only got one right now, so.
The proposals add
We have
one more.
one, and I can tell you that the school district did pass us putting a second SRO in the school, so that will come in front of you at no cost to the city. No additional cost to the city.
So, okay, perfect. That was my only
A
comment.
couple years ago, I had recommended adding some additional funds for training. I'm still in favor of that. If you think there's additional active shooter training, additional firearms, you know, tactical training, whatever, if there's something within the universe of stuff that you think you guys need more of, you know, I'd like an extra, you know, I don't know, at one extra shooting session for the guys per year, or an extra 2 per year. I'm game. I think that's a critical skill. So if it means, you know, an extra 10 grand or 8 grand in the budget to figure something like that out to add to training, you know, don't hesitate on the training.
Good, thank you. Yeah, we are definitely, that's on our radar to look at that, to propose that.
And in this discussion, just jump in. You don't have to raise your hands. Just ask these department heads. So Kevin, I know you want to go next.
How's the dog doing?
The dog?
Yeah.
Awesome. Doing very good. So we just finished up the last major training course, and he's out there all the time now.
So that dog is specific to one individual, or
Correct.
is it to?
Yes. Yeah, he's got one handler. That's Josh Mosier, Officer Mosier, and he's with him, goes home with them, and it's all great right now. So, and I know.
Oh, what's your vision with that?
What's that?
What's your vision with that?
Vision with that? Wow. Okay. Vision is to catch a lot of criminals.
No, I'm referring to, do you want more dogs with more? That's what I'm referring to.
Here's where I'm at. Not with the time I have left. Okay, maybe another chief comes in and
Fine.
says we need another dog. But, you know, manpower wise and so forth, I think where our city is and where we are manpower, I think one is sufficient.
Okay.
Because Gabo is like he's the only canine in the Lake Country area other than the sheriff's department,
That
correct?
is correct.
So it's not common for departments our size to even have 2, let alone 1.
Correct.
Okay.
Two would be a lot. I would be looking for one of our neighboring departments to step up a little bit as
Yeah.
well, so.
So I do have a couple questions for you on your budget. So for the tasers, And again, and I know I've mentioned this, you know, being a part of the Citizens Academy has been incredible. And if there's one thing I can suggest to any elected official is go take the Citizens Academy. I believe it's just once a year, right? Citizens Academy, okay.
You tased?
No, I was not tased, but Chief's wife was tased, and that was, I was
Why didn't
afraid
they
that
tase
Officer Haas was not gonna have a job the next day, or she got a raise. Did she get a raise? But no, going under your taser thing, and your officers did kind of talk about how they don't have their own assigned tasers. You talk about special assignment days. How many special assignment days per year do we have that your entire department would need them?
A parade.
I know we're a parade-happy community, so that's like what, 5 or 6, right? 3 or 4?
And this is just me ballparking guessing. 25?
Oh. So how
Here's
many?
the real key question, though, is how many regattas?
Okay, we are all slightly punch drunk right now. No, yeah. Because I guess where I'm going with this, and again, you know, seeing it from the Citizens Academy side, I see the need, and there's a part of me that's like, okay, you want $15,000 for that? Here you go. But then, you know, the person that doesn't want to spend any money, I'm kind of looking at it going like, how many days out of the year does everybody really need their own taser?
I'd like that one every day.
I would guess 25.
Okay.
Can we also just say, we do have, you know, a significant fund balance. This is a capital investment that would make sense on one-time funds. We should have varying levels of interaction we can have with the community, or, you know, or of, well, criminals or whoever you're interacting with, where you'll be using these tasers, so.
Right.
I think it's a very worthwhile
They switch per
investment.
shift, though.
Yeah.
I think right now they switch.
Right, they need one per
Yeah,
shift.
so day to
right?
day, they have enough. It's the 25 times a year is or approximately, he's saying that they don't have
Those
enough.
are 25 instances then when that officer doesn't have a taser and can't use that degree of force if the situation
You're saying
presents
it's
itself.
better to have the taser.
Yeah,
than not
definitely. We should have the tasers. That's what I'm saying, and it's a very worthwhile expenditure, and I feel like, you know, it makes sense for the capital investment and the money we have, so.
Chief, talking about less lethal options, do you guys carry Remington 870s for beanbag round shotguns or 40 millimeter launcher?
Yes.
Perfect.
If you took the Citizens Academy, you would have seen the demonstration of those.
I run our Citizens Academy. I just want to make sure they have it.
Any other questions for
If
Chief?
you wish to give me tasers for every officer, I will not refuse, so.
Nice try.
We just need to have them available, I think,
Okay.
at all times.
Any other ideas or things that you think might be helpful? We had education being one, looking into tasers. Because what this program's supposed to be, this is different, is to try to give these guys ideas to investigate for you. We'll get into the analysis once we get all the details. Any other thoughts for Chief? Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Who's up next, Mark?
Public Works.
No, I've had this post-nasal drip forever, and I don't know why.
Mr. Herzog.
Okay,
Council
taking
members,
the
what
mayor-
questions do you have for Mr. Herzog, or some ideas or questions?
And taking the mayor's lead, what I think he's trying to direct us to do is not question every item.
Yes.
And focus on their
Yes.
budgetary overall stuff, but
Or if you have any questions.
use this
I'll
to
I
suggest.
can answer those too.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
might
have time to
overlap
do
at
that.
some
But really
point.
try to use this to suggest things we think you
Yes.
need to look at,
Yes.
in what would be our direction. And for me, Public Works is one where I do think it's a department that needs to seriously consider potentially adding an employee. We have not added a DPW worker for 30 years, 25 years.
Oh, probably all the time I've been here.
So it's a department that, with the expansion of streets, expansion of services, I think truly is one of the departments that probably needs, seriously look at, can we use another person? And no department's ever gonna say no to that. But I think as we get to the next budget cycle, I want you to tell us, is this something that's needed? I'm concerned with, over all the time that Mark's been there, we've never, DPW's always been the department it seems we crib from the most, at least since I've been on here. They don't need that extra tow truck this year, that extra person. And I think we've got to be careful because the city is getting bigger and expanding. So I would like you to look at, do we need
another person now, or when in the future would we need another worker, and when that last time has been added.
100% agree.
I'd like to add something to Alderman Rozak. Because of how you guys share between DPW, Park and Rec, and utilities, maybe that's a bigger discussion to try to find out what we get the biggest bang for our buck with. That can help all three of those, because you guys share so much.
Yeah,
And
our
something-
snoring operation, I mean, we're nine strong in the public works sector, but full plowing operation doubles. So
Yeah.
it goes to an 18, that's necessary to do a full event.
And those become park guys,
It could
right?
be parks, it could be, electric,
Parks,
water.
wastewater,
Wastewater.
yeah, all of them.
We pull from all departments, which is probably more than usual.
Yeah.
Well, so all the other communities I've done, it's been public works.
Mayor, spot on, if it's a more holistic discussion of, really that person's better at it in parks because they can do a bunch of stuff in summer that we need additional work on, or that we have issues with, or mowing, and
Yeah, I
then
think
that person moves over and can
kinda
plow.
Evolves, right? Depends where your city is growing. If you're growing in subdivision work, you're growing in, parks or lands, that's where those get evaluated the most. The past, I don't know, I mean, you can read the statistics on the wall outside, is, the city has grown 40 miles in the last, 5 years, so, of streets that have been newly installed. So we're operating with the same staffing there, and I think that probably goes linearly with some of the other departments too, so.
I'd like to see us, I'd like you to look at putting $3 million into streets annually. Right now, we're doing 2. When you and I talked about it, if we did $3 million a year, we could do $2 million on arterial roads, getting to Concord and other places quicker, using the process you described, the grind and cover versus, I forget what you call, but that could allow us to do more miles with less duration, but still get them done more quickly. So I want to get really creative there, and $2 million a year, we're never going to get. A lot of the development that got put in 25 years ago is going to start coming up. And so if we don't get ahead of it now, so I think the time is right to put more money behind it and extend.
Yeah, I gave you the simple math. We've roughly got about 100 miles of pavement, street miles, center lane miles in the city now, or getting close to that. It's about $1 million a mile to replace. So you guys can do the math and
So you're only
see
getting to
how
about 3%
often-
a year, yeah.
How often your streets and your subdivisions, or the streets that you drive on regularly, would get replaced.
I mean, if we don't do this, and we talked about it, we're looking at, for non-arterial roads, we're looking at 50 years before we'd get to a
At a
road.
$2 million rate.
At $2 million rate. And you have to remember that what did we think, probably over the past 5 years, the cost has probably gone up by at least a third. So the $2 million we put in 5 years ago is really only getting you 2/3 of what you got back then. So costs are through the roof.
Yeah, so whatever your expectations and your tolerance is in a community, has to stay in pace with the economical growth as well.
Well, it's roads, the maintenance of the roads, the plowing, those type of things, and the roads themselves are what people expect from that city service, along with police and fire at a high level. And we should be delivering that for what people pay for taxes. I concur 100%. And how we do that, do we spend a little more cash on it? Do we borrow? Borrowing is still a good way, I think, for streets, because it spreads that cost over all the people that we use the streets during that 30 years that you've borrowed the money for it versus paying cash now. And then I think what past councils did was they always paid more cash on these roads. And then when things got tight, they just stopped spending money on roads. Well, we're only going to do $1 million this year. And then we're going to, hire more people wherever. And that's bad. That's a bad way to do it.
Other suggestions or comments besides roads for Jason? Great discussion. Anything you want to bring up, Jason?
I brought up a few of the projects that were already in place, so you got a chance to review those. There's a variety of other things that go on throughout the city that, Public Works or, a contribution of multiple departments also get involved with, whether it's inside the buildings or on our roads or inside of our right-of-ways.
What might help us is if you looked at, I think the request is, okay, if we went to 3 million, and let's say we did it for 3 years, what does that look like and what do we accomplish with that, would be your estimate. And that can maybe help us get into a plan. Or if you think there's a better long-term option, I've seen some things done in Sussex and some other
Yeah.
areas.
Yep, I
Maybe
totally
that might be
agree.
the better approach.
And I'd be willing to kind of give a update to our pavement in general, the condition of it, as we are obligated by the state to rate our roads every 2 years. So we're in the process of doing that right now. That should be complete maybe at the end of this month, and then compile the data. And you've probably seen a variety of these presentations before, but I could update one with the current ratings and share kind of how that translates in today's dollars. How do you move forward? What do you do with that? Some suggestions in that fashion.
So is Concord in for 24 capital projects budget?
I proposed it in there.
Okay, well, and I think this council has made it pretty clear it needs to be in there, so if it's not in there.
I put it in.
Okay.
So it's up,
And then we need to make sure the money's in there to make it
people above me
happen.
to take it
Well,
in or
take a
out.
million of it, right? He says it's $1 million per mile, it's about a mile road.
A
or
little
something.
over a mile, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit.
I
of
put
both.
in like
I
a million and a
acknowledge
half
that,
or something.
But
I object to any more roads in District 2.
it's 4 as well. This is.
I object
this
to that
splits
too.
down the middle.
I say we just do District 4 and forget about District 2.
I think Concord Road's at
One
3
side of the
million.
street.
With 2, just not 3.
Questions or comments for Jason?
Sorry, not 4.
I'd like to say, in light of the fact that we think we want to invest more in the roads, I think we need to revisit the idea of a wheel tax. I've done a rough calculation on that, and we could bring in another $500,000 towards our roads if we install the wheel tax.
So there's a couple ways we can look at the streets. One of them is borrowing, because, you know, the one thing nice with borrowing is that the debt service part of it doesn't fall under the levy limits. So no matter what happens with the levy limits, you're allowed to put that debt service in. So that's one of the ways to look at it. When you get into the wheel tax, there's a lot of other things that go with that, because, you know, the legislature changes things every now and then, saying, hey, if you're gonna pull $1 million out of your levy to put the wheel tax, they don't let you put it back in the levy. Your levy goes down that much. So you're not able to backfill it and get the advantages of that. So I know that Lori has been looking at a couple things, and we've discussed, so we'll be bringing back something on how we, you know, working with Jason, you know, because we've got several major streets in addition to the ones that just need the standard maintenance that $1 million to $2 million a year was meant for. We still have Silver Lake Street. We're just getting Oakwood Avenue done. We've got Main Street, Second Street. So there's a lot, just Second Street, not Main Street. A lot of streets that need to be done that are well above the standard, hey, we can get 3 or 4 streets done for $1 million this year and keep moving through subdivisions. So those are things that we'll be bringing back.
Okay, I think going forward, we need to keep potentially revisiting the wheel
Correct,
tax.
correct.
Because a lot of communities in Wisconsin are using it and using it very
it's-
effectively.
and it is one of
So
the
I'd
things-
like to see what that calculation
I've
is and
talked
how
to
that
Johnson
affects the.
Creek, and that's about the
tax
closest
levy.
community, and they're very open about
Okay.
going through some of that.
Any
I-
other
I-
questions for Jason?
I personally think that I'm getting kind of tired of hearing that word tax. We've got so much money in reserves right now. We should be able to use a portion of that
Well,
regardless.
well, one thing to keep in mind, so yeah.
I mean, there
we've
is a
had-
point where we have to start utilizing the funds at which we've accumulated.
Well, and so we already started with a plan as to using those monies towards capital expenditures to bring those
Our
dollars
roads.
down. What happened this year was the interest rates went up and our building permits, because we had what?
We had a major.
Well over $1 million in roofing permits.
Yeah.
Regardless
the
of
hail.
what
Well,
happened,
No, I'm just,
we should just be able to utilize those funds and
I'd
not
like
talk
to,
about taxes.
I'd like to bring everybody back together. Let's really focus on what we're trying to accomplish. Give Jason as much information as possible on things that you're interested in or that you want him to dig into or have questions
Yeah,
on.
and this is a very common correlation and relationship between the surface that needs to be redone on our pavements, as that's a very common one. The sidewalk systems, the trails, we've talked about that with a few families. that have come and presented some of their interest, but also remember there's, there's multiple utilities below all of this that also has a true cost and value on when you put a surface on that you have to consider the elements that are below it too. They hopefully have longer lives, but there's a lot of dollars that are invested and assets that are below the pavement as well. So we can ramp up, the streets way up here, but if we can't keep up with it, with some of the utilities, they just kind of have to be, kind of positions. And we go through some decent efforts to try to balance the two to find the priorities to make those two work.
I got nothing else.
Thank you, Jason.
I got nothing.
Who's up next?
Utilities, water, electric, and fleet.
All right, Lucas.
This will be fun.
Yeah, that should be
I've got a really long list for you.
Of
take
of
notes.
suggestions, though, right?
Yeah, keeping with the theme of trying to make some suggestions, I really like, one of the biggest things that we've done, at least on the electric side, is continue to focus on trying to get more and more underground. So I want us to keep focusing on that, and if that entails putting more energy or focus into moving as much as possible underground, I think it creates a more beautiful city and a safer energy, because you don't have as many down power lines during ice storms or windstorms or whatever. So that's one thing. The other thing I've mentioned, and I've mentioned this to Joe in the past and Kevin too on the wastewater side, I think we should continue to look at energy independence for some of our utility services, whether that's through putting in solar panels, working with wastewater on capturing some of the methane and using that, and all of us working together. I think we as a community over the next decade should focus very heavily on trying to get ourselves independent of the grid to operate at least our basic functions. It doesn't mean we're going to run all of our electricity. You're not going to get electricity to all the homes from that, but can we run our basic stuff? Can we get water still going? Can we get those things working? Can we still flush our toilets and get water? That to me is something I think we should be very, very heavily focused on over the next few years. So those are my priorities for you guys.
Other comments or suggestions for Lucas? I think the other area too, we talked a little bit more about water safety. And so I think that was already brought up in the last discussion.
I guess, yeah, we still had the rest of our priorities on here as well, so if you got questions or whatnot on them, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Lucas.
Did you want to talk water separate, or was that included?
I
Any-
think
any
we talked
comments
about
for
water
water?
last time. They're going to come back with more options as we were trying to have the filtration system, unless council wants to discuss more.
I have one question though.
No.
No, I don't? No. Okay, I don't have any questions.
The water priority, I think we all expressed a while back,
Actually-
was getting
actually I
more
do.
filters on,
A
more
serious
iron
question.
filters on.
We
So,
went direction on the lead service line.
Okay.
Joe went through a couple options of, right, do we want to pass an ordinance to be a lead-free community? That opens up some other funding opportunities. Do we want to give the residents on the private side the opportunity to put their private replacement on their tax roll? That's a big one. And then using PSC rates to fund things.
I think that sounds like a pretty good idea.
Yeah,
Putting
I
it
think
on
if
the
we can
tax roll.
investigate
It's a
that
really
more.
interesting
I
idea.
would like to hear more about it, and I have heard from so many people in the district that have used the replacement program plan that doesn't exist anymore now. We've ran out of the funds for it, right?
It
to
still
pay-
exists.
But it's not for next year? Is that what it is? It's not being re-upped, basically?
We're hoping, part of this discussion is freeing up money for next year. So
Well,
if
but-
tax roll's an option.
But grant monies.
The
that
grant
we've-
monies are
That
gone,
we've
though.
been
Grant
able
monies
to.
are gone.
Yeah,
The ARPA monies, we've
And
used
so,
up.
right, so, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it made a very real impact in a lot of people's lives in this city. And it's like finding a way to make sure we're working in a partnership to make those replacements happen is important to me. I don't think we can declare the ordinance. I think that we identified, we have so many laterals to replace, right? Like private side. You listed a number,
800.
it's crazy, and it would put us in a very poor position to try to mandate something like that, but
I
maybe.
thought it was like $6 million
Yeah.
to do everything.
But the
Seven.
rate case.
6 to 8 is what we've said.
I
We've
would
got
support
800
looking into
laterals.
So I think what they're hearing is that the council is very interested. We want to go through all those details when we get into budget time, and the recommendations you guys think can help us move forward, not just for lead laterals, but also the filtration system for water.
Well, and the filtration's a big deal because then we can reduce the amount of phosphate usage in the water for the non-binding issue with the lead and all that jazz. So those two things are kind of matched to some degree, I think, as concepts. And again, it's such a critical infrastructure. I think we should, expend the money on those things.
And on several occasions, this last couple of years, I've heard from a lot of my constituents in reference to their water quality and the way it looks. If there's any way that we can educate them prior to you, what'd you call it, bleeding the system or something along those lines?
Before we do our hydrant flushing?
Yeah,
Yep.
that would be outstanding, because on every occasion when I got those phone calls, come to find out that you were doing some sort of,
Yep.
They always put it in the
hydrogen things.
utility bill, don't they? Don't you guys put it in the utility
Put in the
bill?
utility bill, it's on the website, we have to notice it in the paper.
Yeah, they're
It's-
just,
And there's a
it's
big
out
sign
there.
out by City Beach too, isn't there, like, or by the roundabout?
A banner, yep, we've
The
got
banners.
banners in different areas, we take advantage of that, we try to get it out in different platforms.
yeah, and
Other
actually,
ideas
I
or
love when the water gets
suggestions?
smoky, it tastes better.
I think that's a good concern, Kevin, but I think unfortunately, no matter how much you put it out there,
Right.
it's just,
Well, I'm
some people
just-
just don't pay attention.
Who's up
I'm a
next?
voice of the people. So.
You are.
Wastewater.
Okay.
Bowen.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Wastewater.
Kevin?
Thoughts, questions, comments for Mr. Freeber?
Kevin knows my priority. Getting energy production out of our waste.
Yep. And we do partial of that already, that's
Yeah.
what we use to heat buildings and our digesters. But like I say, once we get this new covers and stuff put in, I feel it's gonna be a lot, we're gonna produce a lot more because we got better mixing.
And then working on creating the generators, don't we have to at some point have to buy additional generators, right, to utilize some of the methane?
We got projects we gotta do first. So next year, I'm asking to do right now, I'm designing the septic receiving station so that we could be able to work on biological phosphorus removal. We gotta do the secondary clarifiers. Instead of returning 33 million gallons a day, we want to be able to do 40% of that, which will actually put us.
Well, and if
into a
we're
lot
putting more
better
filters on too, that helps you too on the phosphate removals, right?
Not those type of filters.
Oh, okay.
The actual clarifiers.
But
we
when
do
we
have
put,
filters on ours.
but when we put the filters on the water sources for the iron and don't have to add as much phosphate to the water, that means less
That-
phosphate you have to take
Excuse
out of
me,
the water.
That
later
will
on.
help, correct.
All interrelated, I love it. But yeah, I thought you and I talked about a 3-year plan, maybe of more energy generation.
Yep. I got projects I gotta get done first before we can get to that point.
Yeah, but that's my priority for the next 3 years, so.
Questions, comments?
So I like the additional analysis that you've put out here. One was build septic holding tank receiving stations in 2024, replace RAS piping for secondary clarifiers, designed engineer 2024, and replace window on grid solid final and administration building. What does RAS stand for?
Churn activated sludge. That's the secondary clarifiers project I was just talking about, that we have to change the piping inside there. When it was designed in 1978, they put pipes that were too big. So basically, we have to return 3 million gallons a day to the head of the process.
So now that you are able to speak here tonight, can we agree I no longer owe you a steak dinner?
I was put up to that, just so you know that, okay?
Thanks, Kevin.
Cost me a can of Coke.
Chief Bowen.
All right, you all have to keep talking for 13 more minutes so I win the over-under on what time we get out of here.
Wow.
I can do that.
I'd like to,
Oh, you want you took the under?
Second.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
What do you guys have for me?
What's up for the prize? What'd you guys wager?
I don't know, what did we put on?
Is someone?
Steak dinner. Steak dinner.
Some-
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mark's
steak dinner
buying
for
us steak
Kevin.
dinner.
Kevin's name on it.
11:30, Mark's buying all of us steak dinner.
I like filet.
Mark
I
who?
like filet.
Fine steak and whether or not it's cooked.
Fine line.
Fire district.
Filet. I put my order in.
I mean, for me, it's reducing, it's reducing call times, I think is the most critical thing that you should be doing with the new staffing. So I'm curious as to how much, with the referendum and stuff, we've already, last year, we spent 20% of the referendum. How much do we have? Is that correct?
So this year you invested 60% in.
60%,
We are phasing staff in. The first 6 were hired and began working shift work in March. So what we're doing is looking at it in quarters, is what have we done with that first 6, which is 2 people per day. Actually tomorrow, 8 a.m., we start the academy for the next 6. That's the second phase that was included in this year's budget. And then in August will be the 3rd phase. So we're looking at March, April, May numbers. So now that we just closed out May, we'll be able to look at, now that didn't impact the whole district, but we're gonna look at it in the quadrants and the stations that received that additional staffing to demonstrate the improvement in response times out of those areas. I brought up during our discussion Fiesta Cancun, with the 2 stations that received those personnel, we were out the door immediately compared to a delay of 4 to 5 minutes waiting for people to come in from home if they're available. I just finished talking to another community that had a fire in their area, but those stations did not get the additional staff yet because we're phasing these positions in over 3 years. And they're saying, well, why did it take us so long to get there? And it was the volunteers didn't show up for 20 minutes. That's how long it took to get the paid-on calls from their homes to the station. So then it will be presented on a quarterly basis to you.
So then my priority for you is to get that staffing in the second the money becomes available, get that staffing going as fast. I know that's a lot of staff to hire and a lot of people to go, but the second the next round or phase becomes available, the next funds are in, get those people onboarded and quick, because that will reduce the call times, and I think that'll affect the service in a positive manner. So that's my only priority, because that's just the big, albatross around our neck, is just keeping moving forward with those phases and getting that staff onboarded as quick as possible. Because that's what we all voted for, that's what we all wanted.
And I am proud to stand before you tonight and say that our last process that we opened up, we had 61 applicants for the 9 positions that we were filling.
Good.
61 applicants, all qualified. And actually, of the 10 that we are bringing forward in, 7 of them live in the communities that we serve. They were working elsewhere in other communities, but they want to live and work here. So we've already reopened up the process for the August hires. We've already received 2 applicants, highly qualified, that also live in our communities, that currently do not serve us. So that is what we're doing, and I want to provide the data not only to you, but to the citizens of what this investment means with regards to response times, quality of life, property conservation.
Have you shared this with the other communities also?
As I go to the different community meetings, I provide the same updates to them. So basically every month or every other month, I provide that information.
Other questions or comments for Chief?
That was great, I appreciate the update.
Sorry you didn't get your steak dinner.
Thank you for coming
Thank
and
you.
staying for so long.
Absolutely.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a wonderful night, everybody.
That was pretty good.